Across centuries, Buddhist masters discovered something simple yet profound. The calm we search for is not earned through struggle or waiting for better days. It lives right here, closer than we imagine. Tonight, we will journey through ancient wisdom that brought peace to countless people before us. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. The teachings ahead are tales of ordinary people who found extraordinary peace by learning to meet each moment with kindness instead of resistance. Each person discovered that freedom comes not from perfect circumstances, but from a changed perspective. There is no need to grasp every meaning or hold on to every word. Let these stories move through you like water through open hands. Whether you stay awake or drift into sleep, they will quietly do their work. Allow your body to settle now. Take a slow, deep breath. Let's begin our journey together. In Zen Buddhism, there is a teaching about two kinds of suffering. The first is the suffering we run away from. This kind follows us everywhere we go, like a shadow we cannot escape. The second is the suffering we turn toward and face directly. This kind becomes a doorway, a gateway to freedom and understanding. Most of us spend our lives running. We try to avoid pain, discomfort, difficult emotions. We distract ourselves, numb ourselves, keep ourselves constantly busy so we do not have to feel what we fear. But Zen teaches us something surprising. The very act of running creates more suffering than the thing we are running from. When we finally stop running and turn to face what frightens us, something remarkable happens. The monster we imagined is rarely as terrible as we feared. And in facing it, we discover a strength and capacity we did not know we possessed. Let us explore a story that shows this teaching in action. In the mountains of northern Japan, there lived a young man named Takeshi who had traveled far to find a monastery where he could study Zen. He had heard stories of a teacher named Master Hakuin who lived in a remote temple, a man known for his directness and the depth of his realization. The journey took Takeshi many days. He walked through forests where ancient cedar trees blocked out the sun. He crossed streams swollen with spring snowmelt. He climbed paths so steep that he had to use his hands to pull himself upward over rocks and roots. Finally, exhausted and travel-worn, Takeshi arrived at the monastery gates just as the sun was setting. The temple was simple, built of weathered wood that had turned silver with age. He could hear the evening chanting from inside, the low voices of monks reciting sutras. When the chanting ended, Takeshi knocked on the great wooden door. It opened to reveal an elderly monk with a face like cracked leather, eyes bright and alert, despite his obvious age. "I have come to study with Master Hakuin," Takeshi said, bowing deeply. "I wish to learn the way of Zen." The old monk studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled, though there was something slightly unsettling in that smile. "Welcome," the monk said. "I am Hakuin. Before you enter, I must ask you one question. Are you afraid to suffer?" Takeshi felt confused by this strange greeting. He had expected questions about his sincerity or his background, not this blunt inquiry about suffering. "I'm not sure what you mean, Master." Hakuin's eyes twinkled with something like amusement. "It's a simple question. Are you afraid to suffer?" "I suppose everyone is afraid of suffering," Takeshi answered carefully. The master nodded. "True enough. But there are two kinds of suffering, young man. The first is the kind you run away from. It follows you everywhere, grows larger the more you flee, becomes your constant companion even in your dreams. He paused, looking at Takeshi with great intensity. The second kind is the suffering you turn toward and face directly. You sit with it, breathe with it, allow it to be exactly what it is without fighting. This suffering, this kind, becomes a teacher. It shows you the way through. It becomes the very gateway to freedom. Hakuin stepped aside, gesturing for Takeshi to enter. If you can learn to face what you fear, to sit with what is difficult, to stop running from the parts of yourself you don't like, then come in. You are welcome here. But if you want comfort and easy answers, you should look elsewhere. Takeshi stood in the doorway, feeling the weight of this choice. He thought about the comfortable life he had left behind, the family who wanted him to take over their merchant business. He thought about how much easier it would be to go back, to avoid this path that promised difficulty. But something in him knew that he had been running his whole life. Running from his father's expectations, from his own fears of inadequacy, from the deep questions that haunted his quiet moments. And all that running had brought him no peace. "I wish to enter," Takeshi said quietly. "I am ready to face what comes." Master Hakuin smiled then, a genuine warmth filling his weathered face. "Good. Then your true training begins now." This story shows us the choice we all face. We can spend our lives avoiding difficulty, running from pain, hiding from the parts of ourselves we find uncomfortable. Or we can choose the path Takeshi chose, the path of turning toward our experience with courage and honesty. In Zen practice, this is not about seeking out suffering or making life harder than it needs to be. It is about changing our relationship with the difficulties that naturally arise. When we stop bracing against pain, when we stop fleeing from discomfort, we discover that we are much stronger and more capable than we imagined. The suffering we face directly loses its power over us. Like a wave that looks terrifying from a distance but can be ridden skillfully once we engage with it, our fears and pains become manageable when we stop running from them. Take a gentle breath now. Feel your body resting, supported and safe. Notice if there are any places of tension or holding. You do not need to fix them or make them go away. Simply acknowledge them with the same kind acceptance you might offer a friend. Zen Buddhism teaches us that emotions are like weather patterns moving through the vast sky of our awareness. They arise, they stay for a time, and they pass. Anger comes like a sudden storm. Sadness drifts in like fog. Joy bursts forth like sunshine breaking through clouds. But none of them last forever, and none of them define who we truly are. The problem comes when we identify with our emotions, when we believe that we are our anger, or our sadness, or our fear. Then we get caught up in the storm, tossed about by winds we think we cannot control. But there is another way. We can learn to witness our emotions, to create space around them, to see them as temporary visitors rather than permanent residents. This does not mean suppressing our feelings or pretending they do not exist. It means making room for them, acknowledging them, and allowing them to move through us naturally. Let us return to our story of Takeshi to see how this teaching unfolded in his experience. Takeshi settled into life at the monastery. The days followed a strict rhythm. Rising before dawn, sitting in meditation while darkness still filled the hall. chanting sutras as the first light touched the mountains, working in the garden, sweeping the paths, preparing simple meals, more meditation in the afternoon and evening, then sleep on a thin mat in a small room barely large enough to lie down. For the first few weeks, Takeshi found a kind of peace in this simple routine. Away from the complications of his former life, surrounded by the quietness of the monastery, he felt calm and centered. But then something unexpected began to happen. As he sat in meditation hour after hour, day after day, emotions began to surface that he had kept buried for years. Anger at his father for never accepting his choices. Grief over opportunities he felt he had missed. Fear about whether he was capable of true understanding. The anger was the most surprising. Takeshi had always thought of himself as a peaceful person, someone who got along with others, who avoided conflict. But there in the meditation hall, with nothing to distract him from his own mind, rage began to bubble up. Small irritations would set him off. The sound of another monk coughing. The way someone chewed their food during the silent meals. The creaking of the wooden floor when people shifted position. One morning, after a particularly difficult meditation session where he had felt nothing but burning anger at everything and everyone, Takeshi went to Master Hakuin. "Master, something is wrong with me. I came here to find peace, but instead I am filled with anger. I thought meditation was supposed to calm the mind, but mine is more agitated than ever. What should I do?" Hakuin looked at him with those penetrating eyes and smiled. "Ah, good. Very good." "Good?" Takeshi was confused. "How can this be good? You asked what you should do. Here is what I want you to do. Go back to your room. Close the door and the windows. It is summer now, so it will be hot. Wrap yourself in your heaviest robes. Then sit there with your anger. Don't try to meditate. Don't try to calm yourself. Just sit with the anger until you know it completely." "But Master, that sounds terrible." "Yes," Hakuin agreed. "Probably it will be uncomfortable. But do it anyway. Sit with your anger until you can feel where it lives in your body. Until you can hear the stories it tells. Until you understand its energy completely. Sit with it until you know anger the way you know an old friend." Takeshi did as his teacher instructed. He went to his small room, closed the door and the paper windows, and wrapped himself in his thick winter robes despite the summer heat. Then he sat. At first, the anger felt overwhelming. It seemed to fill every part of him, burning like a fire in his chest and throat. He wanted to throw off the robes, storm out of the room, do anything but sit with this unbearable feeling. But he remembered Hakuin's words about the two kinds of suffering. This was the suffering he needed to face, not flee from. So he sat, and gradually something began to shift. He noticed that the anger was not one solid thing, but many layers. Beneath the surface irritation was deeper anger at his father. Beneath that was hurt at feeling unaccepted. Beneath that was fear that he was not good enough. He felt where the anger lived in his body. It tightened his jaw and shoulders. It created a burning sensation in his chest. It made his breathing shallow and quick. He heard the stories the anger told. Stories about how he had been wronged, how others should be different, how life was unfair. And as he sat with it, not fighting it, not trying to make it go away, just being present with it, the anger began to change. The tight burning loosened. The stories quieted. What remained was simply energy, neither good nor bad, just life force moving through him. Hours passed. The heat in the room became intense. Sweat soaked through his robes. But Takeshi stayed, breathing with the anger, making space for it, allowing it to be exactly what it was. When he finally emerged from his room as the sun was setting, he felt exhausted but also strangely peaceful. The anger had not disappeared entirely, but it no longer controlled him. He had learned that he could be with it, that he did not have to run from it or be overwhelmed by it. Master Hakuin saw him and nodded approvingly. "So, now you understand something." "I think so," Takeshi said. "The anger is still there, but it is different now. Smaller somehow, more manageable. You have learned to expand your capacity," Hakuin said. "When we run from our emotions, our world becomes very small. We spend all our energy trying to avoid what we fear. But when we learn to be present with our emotions, to make space for them, our world becomes vast. We discover we can hold much more than we thought possible." This teaching at the heart of Zen Buddhism shows us a path through difficulty. We all experience strong emotions. Anger, fear, sadness, anxiety. These are part of being human. The question is not how to eliminate them, but how to be with them skillfully. When Takeshi sat in that hot room with his anger, he was practicing what Zen calls making space. Instead of getting caught up in the emotion or pushing it away, he created a field of awareness large enough to hold it. He became the witness, the spacious awareness within which anger could arise and move and eventually settle. This is not easy practice. Our instinct is to run from pain or to fight against it. But both running and fighting keep us trapped in suffering. The third option, the Zen option, is to turn toward our experience with gentle attention, to face what arises without judgment, and to trust our capacity to be present with whatever comes. As you rest now, you might notice emotions or sensations in your own experience. Perhaps there is tension somewhere in your body. Perhaps there is a thought or feeling you have been avoiding. See if you can bring the same quality of gentle attention to it that Takeshi brought to his anger. Not trying to fix or change anything, just acknowledging what is present with kindness. This is the beginning of freedom. Not freedom from having difficult emotions, but freedom from being controlled by them. When we learn to witness our inner weather without being swept away by every storm, we discover a peace that is always available, always present beneath the changing conditions of our experience. The path of Zen invites us to stop running, to face what is here, and to discover in that facing the very gateway to freedom that Master Hakuin spoke of. This is not the end of difficulty, but it is the end of the suffering we create through our resistance to difficulty. Breathe gently. Rest in this understanding. You are learning to be present for your own life, and in that presence, peace naturally arises. There is another dimension to this teaching about acceptance that Zen Buddhism offers us. It is the understanding that our resistance to what is already here creates most of our suffering. The pain itself is often much smaller than the suffering we create by fighting against it. Imagine you have a headache. The headache itself is unpleasant, yes. But notice what happens when you add resistance to it. You think, I shouldn't have this headache. This ruins my whole day. Why is this happening to me? You tense against the pain, bracing your body, tightening your shoulders and jaw. You feel frustrated, angry, perhaps even frightened that something is seriously wrong. All of this resistance, all of these thoughts and tensions, these create suffering that is far greater than the headache itself. The headache is just sensation. The suffering is what we add to it through our rejection of what is. Zen teaches us a different way. When pain arises, physical or emotional, we can learn to meet it with acceptance. Not resignation, not giving up, but a clear acknowledgement that this is what is present right now. And in that acceptance, something remarkable happens. The suffering we create through resistance begins to dissolve, even if the pain remains. This does not mean we become passive or stop taking care of ourselves. If you have a headache, you can still take medicine, rest, drink water. But you do these things from a place of wise response rather than panicked resistance. The quality of your experience transforms completely. Takeshi continued his training at the monastery, and over time, he discovered that the teaching about facing suffering applied to all areas of life. When physical pain arose during long hours of sitting meditation, he learned to breathe with it rather than fighting against it. When difficult memories surfaced, he learned to acknowledge them with kindness rather than pushing them away. One winter, Master Hakuin became ill. For weeks, he lay in his room, weak and feverish. The other monks took turns caring for him, but Hakuin faced his illness with the same equanimity he brought to everything. Takeshi sat with his teacher one afternoon, offering him water and adjusting his blankets against the cold. "Master, aren't you suffering?" Takeshi asked, seeing how pale and weak Hakuin had become. The old man smiled faintly. "My body is experiencing pain and weakness. But suffering? That is something different. Suffering is what we add when we resist what is already here." "I don't understand. How can you be in pain without suffering?" Hakuin shifted slightly on his mat. "Watch carefully. Right now, there is discomfort in this body. Fever, aches, weakness. These sensations are present. But I am not fighting against them. I am not thinking this should not be happening. I am not imagining a catastrophic future. I am simply here, breathing with what is." He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "When I was younger, I fought against every discomfort. A small pain would become great suffering because I added so much resistance to it. But through practice, I learned to let experience be what it is. The pain is still here, but the suffering I used to create around it has dissolved." Takeshi sat quietly, absorbing these words. He realized that his teacher was demonstrating the very teaching he had offered on that first evening. This illness was the suffering Hakuin was facing, not fleeing from. And in that facing, he had found a kind of peace that existed even in the midst of physical difficulty. This is one of the most profound gifts of Zen practice. We learn that we have much more capacity than we realized. The things we thought we could not bear, the emotions we believed would destroy us, the difficulties we feared would overwhelm us, all of these can be met with awareness and acceptance. This does not happen overnight. It is a gradual training, like strengthening a muscle through gentle, consistent practice. Each time we choose to face rather than flee, each time we create space for our experience rather than fighting against it, we expand our capacity a little more. And something else happens too. As we learn to be present with our own suffering, we naturally develop compassion for the suffering of others. We see that everyone is struggling with something, everyone is carrying burdens, everyone is doing their best to navigate the difficulties of being human. This understanding softens us. It makes us kinder, more patient, more willing to offer understanding rather than judgment. The same acceptance we learn to bring to our own experience begins to flow outward toward all beings. Master Hakuin recovered from his illness that winter, and Takeshi remained at the monastery for many years, deepening his practice, learning again and again to face what arose with courage and acceptance. Eventually, he became a teacher himself, offering to his own students the same wisdom that Hakuin had offered him on that first evening at the monastery gates. The teaching remained the same. There are two kinds of suffering. The kind you run from, which follows you everywhere, and the kind you face, which becomes a doorway to freedom. As you rest now, feel the natural rhythm of your breathing. Notice that breath comes and goes without effort, without struggle. You do not have to force air into your lungs or push it out. Your body knows how to breathe. It accepts each inhalation, releases each exhalation, flows with the natural rhythm of life. This is the quality of acceptance that Zen practice cultivates. Not forced, not passive, but a natural flowing with what is. When we stop fighting against our experience, when we release our grip on how we think things should be, we discover that life knows how to move through us just as breath knows how to flow. This is the peace that lives at the heart of Zen Buddhism. Not the peace of having everything go our way, but the peace of being able to meet whatever comes with an open heart and a steady mind. The peace of knowing that we can face what arises, that we have the capacity to be present for all of it, the joy and the sorrow, the ease and the difficulty. Let your body soften a little more. Let your breath continue its gentle rhythm. And know that with each moment of acceptance, with each choice to face rather than flee, you are walking the path that countless practitioners have walked before you, all discovering the same simple truth. Freedom is found not by changing what is, but by changing how we meet what is. And in that shift, everything transforms. In Zen Buddhism, there is a simple practice that transforms everything. It is called presence or mindful awareness. This practice is not complicated. It does not require special training or years of study. It simply means being fully where you are, giving your complete attention to this moment, this breath, this experience. Most of us live like travelers who never arrive. Our bodies are in one place, but our minds are somewhere else entirely. We eat breakfast while planning our day. We walk through beautiful scenery while worrying about tomorrow. We talk with loved ones while thinking about what we need to do later. We spend our lives half present, half distracted, and then wonder why nothing feels quite satisfying. Zen teaches us that life only happens in the present moment. The past is gone, existing now only as memory. The future has not arrived, existing only as imagination. The only place we can actually live, the only time that is real, is right now. When we learn to be fully present, a miraculous thing happens. Ordinary experiences become extraordinary. Simple moments reveal unexpected richness. We discover that the peace and satisfaction we have been seeking is not hiding in some future moment, but available right here in the completeness of now. Let us explore a story that shows how this teaching unfolded in the life of a traveling merchant. In the coastal villages of old Japan, there lived a tea merchant named Ichiro. His work required him to travel constantly from village to village, selling the fine teas he sourced from mountain plantations. He carried his wares in carefully wrapped bundles on a wooden cart that he pulled along dusty roads and narrow mountain paths. Ichiro was successful in his trade. He knew tea well, could speak knowledgeably about different varieties and preparation methods. But, despite his success, he felt perpetually unsatisfied. His mind was always somewhere else, always focused on the next destination, the next sale, the next thing that needed doing. When he walked the mountain paths, he barely noticed the cedar forests around him. His mind was calculating prices, planning conversations with customers, worrying about whether the weather would hold. When he stopped at inns for the night, he ate his meals quickly, tasting nothing, already thinking about tomorrow's route. Even when he had a particularly good day of sales, the satisfaction lasted only moments before his mind moved on to the next concern. He would lie awake at night in unfamiliar rooms, unable to rest because his thoughts raced endlessly forward. One evening, Ichiro arrived in a small mountain village just as the sun was setting. He was exhausted from a long day of walking, his feet sore and his back aching from pulling the heavy cart. He needed lodging for the night, but the village had no inn. As he stood in the village square wondering what to do, he noticed a small tea house with warm light glowing from its windows. Inside, an elderly woman sat alone at a low wooden table. She was preparing tea with slow, deliberate movements. Each gesture seemed complete in itself. She warmed the pot, measured the leaves, poured the water, all with a quality of attention that Ichiro had never seen before. It was as if nothing else in the world existed except this simple ceremony. Ichiro knocked gently on the doorframe. The woman looked up and smiled, gesturing for him to enter. "Forgive the intrusion," Ichiro said. "I am a traveling merchant and need shelter for the night. Is there anywhere in this village I might stay?" The woman studied him for a moment. "You may stay here if you wish. I have an extra room. But first, will you join me for tea?" Ichiro agreed, though he was eager to settle in and prepare for tomorrow's travels. He sat down across from the woman, who introduced herself as Fumiko. "I am a tea merchant," Ichiro said, settling onto the cushion. "I have teas from all over the region. Perhaps you would like to see my collection? I have some very rare varieties that you might enjoy." Fumiko smiled gently and continued her slow preparations. "Thank you for your kind offer. But first, let us drink this simple tea I have already prepared. It is nothing special, just ordinary green tea. But please, share it with me." She poured tea into 2 small clay cups and placed one before Ichiro. Then she lifted her own cup and took a slow, appreciative sip. Her eyes closed for a moment and a look of deep contentment crossed her face. Ichiro lifted his cup and drank quickly, ready to comment on the quality and offer his professional assessment. But before he could speak, Fumiko asked quietly, "What did you taste?" The question surprised him. "Well, it is green tea. Reasonable quality, though I have much finer varieties in my cart. The leaves could have been picked earlier in the season for a more delicate flavor, and the water temperature seems a bit high, which brings out some bitterness." Fumiko nodded. "I see. But I did not ask you to analyze or judge the tea. I asked what you tasted." Ichiro felt confused. "I just told you." It is green tea with some bitterness from the water being too hot." "No," Fumiko said gently. "You told me your thoughts about the tea. Your comparisons, your judgments, your professional opinions. But what did you actually taste? Right now, in your mouth, what sensations are present?" Ichiro paused. No one had ever asked him to drink tea this way before. He lifted the cup again and took another sip, this time trying to focus on the actual experience rather than his analysis of it. He noticed the warmth spreading across his tongue, the slight astringency that made his mouth feel dry, a hint of sweetness that appeared after the initial bitterness faded, an earthy quality that reminded him somehow of morning mist over mountain forests. "I tasted warmth," he said slowly. "Bitterness and then sweetness. Something earthy and alive." Fumiko's face brightened. "Yes. Now you tasted the tea. Not your thoughts about the tea, but the tea itself." She poured him another cup. "Try again. This time, also notice what it feels like to hold the warm cup in your hands. Notice the sensation of swallowing. Pay attention to the steam rising from the surface." Ichiro spent the next hour drinking tea with a level of attention he had never brought to anything before. Each sip became a small meditation. He noticed how his breathing naturally slowed when he focused completely on the present moment. His racing thoughts settled into quiet appreciation for what was actually happening right now. "This is remarkable," he said finally. "I have been selling tea for 20 years, but I do not think I have ever truly tasted it before." Fumiko smiled. "Most people spend their whole lives this way. Eating without tasting, walking without seeing, listening without hearing. They are so busy thinking about experience that they miss the direct experience itself." She refreshed his cup once more. "You said you are a tea merchant, always traveling. Tell me, where is your mind when you walk the mountain paths?" Ichiro thought about this. "Usually I am thinking about where I need to go next, which villages I should visit, how much tea I have left to sell, whether I am making good time. And where is your mind when you talk with customers? I suppose I am often thinking about what I will say next, how to make the sale, what other villages I need to visit that day." Fumiko nodded knowingly. "So your body walks the paths, but your mind is elsewhere. Your body sits with customers, but your mind is already moving on to the next thing. You are never fully where you are." Her words struck Ichiro deeply. He realized she was describing exactly how he lived his life. Always half present, half distracted, never fully engaged with what was actually happening. "Is there another way?" he asked. "There is a very old way," Fumiko said. "It is the way of presence, of being completely where you are, giving your full attention to what is happening right now. When you walk, just walk. When you drink tea, just drink tea. When you talk with someone, really listen, really be there." She looked at him with kind eyes. "This is not complicated. But it is also not easy, because we have spent our whole lives training ourselves to be elsewhere. We have to relearn what we knew as children, how to be fully present for our own lives." Ichiro stayed with Fumiko for 3 days, and those days changed everything for him. She did not give him long lectures or complex teachings. She simply showed him how to bring complete attention to ordinary activities. When they prepared meals together, she showed him how to notice the textures and colors of vegetables as he cut them, how to listen to the sound of water boiling, how to smell rice as it cooked. When they walked to the village well for water, she pointed out things he would normally have missed. The way morning light caught dewdrops on spider webs, the sound of birds calling to each other, the feeling of earth beneath his feet. Everything became an opportunity to practice presence, and Ichiro began to understand what he had been missing all these years. On the morning he prepared to leave, Fumiko gave him a small bowl of tea as a parting gift. "Remember what you learned here," she said. "Presence is not something you practice only in quiet moments. It is a way of meeting every moment of your life. When you are walking, really walk. When you are selling tea, really be there with your customers. When you eat, truly taste. This is how peace is found, not by changing your circumstances, but by being fully present for whatever circumstances you are in." Ichiro continued his travels as a merchant, but everything had transformed. Not because his external life had changed, but because his relationship to his life had changed completely. When he walked the mountain paths now, he noticed the changing seasons. The way cherry blossoms gave way to summer green, then autumn colors, then winter's stark beauty. He felt his feet on the earth with each step. He heard the wind moving through trees. When he talked with customers, he really listened to them. He asked about their families, their lives, their preferences in tea. People began to seek him out not just for his quality products, but because he made them feel truly seen and heard. His success as a merchant actually grew, but that was not what mattered most to him anymore. What mattered was that he was finally living his life instead of rushing through it. He was tasting the tea instead of just selling it. Years later, people would ask Ichiro about the secret to his contentment. He would simply say, "I learned to be where I am." This teaching from Zen Buddhism offers us something precious. It shows us that we do not need to change our circumstances to find peace. We do not need to quit our jobs, move to a monastery, or wait for retirement to begin living fully. We simply need to learn to be present for the life we already have. When Ichiro drank tea with Fumiko, he discovered the difference between thinking about experience and having direct experience. Most of us spend our lives in our heads, analyzing, comparing, judging, planning. We miss the richness that is available when we drop into direct sensory awareness. This is not about stopping all thought. Thinking has its place and its purpose. But when thinking becomes our only mode of being, when we are always lost in mental commentary about life instead of experiencing life directly, we become strangers to our own existence. Presence brings us home to ourselves. It allows us to actually taste our food, to really see the people we are talking with, to genuinely feel the sensations in our body. It makes ordinary moments extraordinary because we are finally fully there for them. Take a moment now to practice this presence. Notice the sensation of your body resting. Feel the temperature of the air on your skin. Listen to any sounds around you without labeling or judging them, just hearing them as pure sensation. Notice your breath moving in and out without trying to control it. This is presence. This simple, direct awareness of what is actually happening right now. And in this awareness, a natural peace arises. There is another dimension to presence that Zen Buddhism teaches us. It is the practice of the mindful pause, the art of creating space before we react. This small practice has the power to transform our relationships, our work, and our inner peace. Most of us move through life in a reactive mode. Something happens and we immediately respond, often automatically, without any space between the trigger and our reaction. Someone says something that irritates us, and we snap back. We feel an impulse and we act on it. We have a thought and we believe it. But Zen teaches us that we have a choice. Between what happens and how we respond, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom. Let us explore another story that shows how this teaching can transform even the most challenging situations. In a village near a wide river, there lived a ferryman named Katsuro who transported people and goods across the water. He was strong and skilled at his work, but he was known throughout the village for his terrible temper. Katsuro would become angry at the smallest things. If passengers were late, he would yell at them. If someone asked a question he thought was foolish, he would respond with harsh words. If the river was difficult, he would curse and complain. His angry outbursts had become so common that people dreaded using his ferry, but there was no other way to cross the river. One day, an old monk needed to cross the river. He had heard about Katsuro's temper, and as he approached the ferry, he could see the ferryman shouting at a group of passengers who had brought too much cargo. "I told you there are limits to what this ferry can carry," Katsuro said. "Are you trying to sink us all? Take half of this back to shore." The passengers scrambled to remove some of their bundles, their faces red with embarrassment. When the monk's turn came to board, he stepped onto the ferry quietly and sat down without saying a word. As they crossed the river, a sudden gust of wind caught the ferry, pushing it slightly off course. Katsuro struggled with the long pole he used to guide the ferry, his face darkening with frustration. "Cursed wind," he grumbled. Always at the worst possible time. The monk watched all of this with calm attention. When they reached the other side and the passengers had departed, he remained sitting in the ferry. "Aren't you getting off?" Katsuro asked impatiently. "I will," the monk said. "But first, I wonder if you would do something for me." Katsuro sighed. "What is it?" "I wonder if you would be willing to try a small experiment for just 7 days. I think it might help you." "Help me?" "I do not need help. I just need passengers who are not foolish and weather that cooperates." The monk smiled gently. "Perhaps. But would you be willing to try this practice anyway? It is very simple." Something in the monk's peaceful presence made Katsuro curious despite himself. "What is this practice?" "For 7 days, whenever you feel the urge to speak in anger, I want you to take 3 slow breaths first. Count them silently. Breathe in, breathe out, 1. Breathe in, breathe out, 2. Breathe in, breathe out, 3. Only then, if you still want to speak, go ahead." Katsuro laughed. "That is all? Seems like a waste of time." "Perhaps it is," the monk agreed. "But what harm could it do to try for just 7 days? Think of it as an experiment." Katsuro shrugged. "Fine. 7 days. Then you will leave me alone?" "Then I will leave you alone," the monk promised. The next morning started like any other. A passenger arrived late, causing Katsuro to wait. He felt anger rising hot in his chest, opened his mouth to yell, then remembered the monk's instruction. He took a breath. 1. Another breath. 2. A third breath. 3. By the time he finished the 3 breaths, something had shifted. The anger was still there, but it felt less urgent, less overwhelming. He found himself saying calmly, "Please try to arrive on time tomorrow." When one person is late, everyone else must wait. The passenger apologized sincerely, and they crossed the river without incident. This pattern repeated throughout the day. Each time Katsuro felt anger rising, he took his 3 breaths. Sometimes the pause changed what he said completely. Sometimes he still spoke sternly, but without the harsh edge that usually colored his words. And sometimes he realized that what had seemed so important to say was not worth saying at all. By the 3rd day, something remarkable was happening. Katsuro found that he was not getting angry as often. The 3-breath pause had become automatic, and in that brief space, he could see situations more clearly. He noticed that his anger often came from his own tiredness or frustration, not from what passengers were actually doing. By the 7th day, Katsuro's transformation was visible to everyone in the village. He still worked with the same intensity, but the constant angry outbursts had ceased. Passengers began to relax on his ferry. Some even started conversations with him, and he found himself enjoying their company. When the monk returned to cross back to the other side of the river, Katsuro greeted him with genuine warmth. "Your 7 days are complete," the monk said. "How did your experiment go?" Katsuro smiled, something he rarely did. "I do not understand how something so simple could change so much. Taking 3 breaths, it seems like nothing. But somehow it has changed everything." The monk nodded. The pause creates space. In that space, you can choose your response instead of being controlled by automatic reactions. You discovered that you are not your anger. You are the awareness that can witness anger, breathe with it, and then choose how to act. "I thought the pause was about controlling my temper," Katsuro said. "But it is more than that. In those 3 breaths, I see things more clearly. I notice what is actually happening instead of just reacting to my thoughts about what is happening." "Yes," the monk said. "This is the practice of presence. When we pause, we wake up to this moment instead of being lost in our automatic patterns. And in that waking up, we find freedom." The practice of the mindful pause that Katsuro learned is available to all of us. We do not need to take 3 breaths specifically, though that is a good practice. The key is creating any space at all between what happens and how we respond. In Zen Buddhism, this space is considered sacred. It is the gap where awareness lives, where choice becomes possible, where we can act from wisdom instead of from habit. Think about your own life. How often do you react automatically? How often do words leave your mouth before you have truly considered them? How often do you act on impulse and then regret it later? The mindful pause offers a different way. When something triggers you, when you feel anger or fear or any strong emotion rising, you can pause. Take a breath. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice what is actually happening in this moment, not what you think is happening, not what you fear might happen, but what is actually here right now. In that pause, you create space for wisdom to emerge. You give yourself the chance to respond skillfully instead of reacting blindly. This does not mean you never feel angry or never speak firmly. It means you choose these responses consciously instead of being controlled by them. Katsuro discovered that most of his anger came from his own internal state, not from external circumstances. When he was tired or frustrated, everything seemed like a problem. When he paused and brought awareness to his experience, he could see more clearly what was actually needed in each situation. This is one of the great gifts of presence. It shows us the difference between our interpretations of reality and reality itself. So much of our suffering comes from the stories we tell ourselves about what is happening, stories that often have little to do with what is actually occurring. Let your awareness settle into this moment now. Notice if there is any tension in your body. You do not need to fix it or change it. Just notice it with gentle attention. This is the practice of presence, of being with what is without immediately trying to change it. In this practice, we discover a natural peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because we are no longer at war with our experience. We are simply here, breathing, aware, present for this moment exactly as it is. And in this presence, we find the freedom that Zen Buddhism has always pointed toward. The freedom to choose our responses. The freedom to see clearly. The freedom to live our lives with awareness instead of sleepwalking through them lost in thought and automatic reaction. Rest in this understanding. Feel the natural ease that comes when you stop trying so hard and simply allow yourself to be present. This is the heart of Zen practice, and it is always available, always here, waiting in each pause, each breath, each moment of simple awareness. In Zen Buddhism, there is a profound teaching about compassion that surprises many people. It is this: before we can truly offer compassion to others, we must first learn to offer it to ourselves. This is not selfishness. It is wisdom. We cannot give what we do not have. Many of us have been taught that caring for ourselves is somehow wrong or indulgent. We believe we should be strong, perfect, always capable. When we struggle or make mistakes, we respond with harsh self-judgment rather than kindness. We speak to ourselves in ways we would never speak to a friend. This inner harshness creates suffering that ripples outward into all our relationships. When we are at war with ourselves, we bring that war energy into the world. When we judge ourselves mercilessly, we tend to judge others harshly too. But Zen shows us another way. When we learn to hold our own struggles with gentleness, when we meet our imperfections with understanding rather than criticism, something beautiful happens. This kindness naturally extends outward. The compassion we cultivate for ourselves becomes compassion for all beings. Let us explore a story that shows how this teaching transformed the practice of a devoted student. In a mountain monastery known for its rigorous meditation practice, there lived a young nun named Akiko. She had come to the monastery with great dedication, determined to achieve enlightenment through sheer force of will and discipline. Akiko pushed herself harder than any other student. She would rise at 2 a.m, an hour before the wake-up bell, to begin her meditation. She would sit longer than required, often until her legs went completely numb and pain shot through her knees and back. During meals, she would eat quickly, barely tasting her food, seeing eating as a necessary interruption to her practice. When her mind wandered during meditation, Akiko would berate herself internally. Focus. Stop being so weak and undisciplined. The other students can do this easily. What is wrong with you? When she felt drowsy, she would dig her fingernails into her palms to stay alert, considering sleepiness a moral failure. After 6 months of this punishing routine, Akiko was more miserable than when she arrived. Her body was thin from skipping meals to meditate longer. Her mind was exhausted from constant self-criticism. Her heart felt heavy with shame about her perceived failures. Instead of peace, she had found only more suffering. One morning, after a particularly difficult meditation session where she had attacked herself mentally for every wandering thought, Akiko went to the monastery's small garden. She sat beneath a cherry tree and cried, feeling like a complete failure as a spiritual student. Master Setsuko, the monastery's elderly teacher, happened to be walking through the garden. She saw Akiko's distress and sat down quietly beside her on the stone bench. "Tell me about your practice," Master Setsuko said gently. Through her tears, Akiko described her rigorous schedule, her constant self-criticism, and her disappointment in her lack of progress. "I try so hard," she sobbed, "but I am just not good enough. I will never be able to meditate like the other students. Maybe I should just give up." Master Setsuko listened in compassionate silence. When Akiko finished, the teacher pointed to a small bird that had landed near their feet. The bird was pecking at the ground, searching for seeds. "Watch this little bird," Master Setsuko said. "See how naturally it moves. It does not criticize itself for not finding food quickly enough. It does not compare itself to other birds. It simply does what birds do, moment by moment, with complete acceptance of its own nature." Akiko watched the bird for several minutes. There was something peaceful in its simple presence, its natural way of being. "Now," Master Setsuko continued, "imagine if this bird spent its time telling itself it was a terrible bird, that it should fly better or sing more beautifully. What would happen to its natural ability to find food and shelter? What would happen to its joy in simply being a bird?" Akiko understood immediately. It would be too busy criticizing itself to do what it naturally knows how to do. Master Setsuko nodded. "You came here to learn peace and compassion. But the first place to practice these qualities is with yourself. How can you offer kindness to others if you show nothing but harshness to your own heart? How can you find peace in meditation if you are at war with your own mind?" The teacher's voice was filled with gentle warmth. The path to awakening is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming kind. First to yourself, then to all beings. Your mind will wander during meditation. That is what minds do. The practice is not to stop this wandering, but to notice it with the same gentle affection you would show a beloved child who gets distracted while learning to walk. From that day forward, Akiko changed her entire approach to practice. Instead of commanding her mind to focus, she would gently invite it back to the breath. Instead of criticizing wandering thoughts, she would acknowledge them with simple phrases like thinking or planning, and return to her meditation with kindness. When her body felt tired, instead of pushing through with harsh determination, she would adjust her posture or take a brief rest, treating her physical needs with respect. When emotions arose during sitting, instead of judging them as obstacles, she would breathe with them compassionately, as she might comfort a friend in distress. The transformation was remarkable. Within weeks, Akiko's meditation became naturally deeper and more peaceful. Her mind, no longer under constant attack, began to settle into the stillness she had been seeking. More importantly, the harsh inner critic that had tormented her for so long gradually softened into a voice of gentle encouragement and support. Years later, Akiko became known for her compassionate teaching style and her ability to help struggling students find their way to genuine peace. When asked about her approach, she would say, "I learned that the kindness we show ourselves becomes the foundation for all the kindness we offer the world. We cannot give what we do not have, and we cannot find peace through war, even when that war is with ourselves." This story reveals one of the most essential teachings in Zen Buddhism about compassion. Before we can truly help others or find lasting peace, we must learn to treat ourselves with the same gentleness and understanding we would offer to someone we deeply love. Most of us carry an inner critic that is harsher than we would ever be to a friend. We say things to ourselves that would horrify us if we said them to another person. "You're so stupid. You always mess things up. You'll never be good enough." This internal violence prevents us from accessing our natural wisdom and peace. Akiko's journey shows us that self-compassion is not self-indulgence or making excuses for laziness. It is the recognition that we learn and grow more effectively in an atmosphere of kindness than in an atmosphere of constant judgment. When we stop waging war against our own imperfections, our minds naturally settle into the peace that was always there beneath the conflict. This teaching transforms everything about how we approach spiritual practice and personal growth. Instead of trying to force ourselves into enlightenment through harsh discipline, we create the conditions for awakening through gentle persistence and loving patience. Take a gentle breath now and notice how your body responds to the idea of treating yourself with complete kindness. Feel how even the possibility of ending the inner war creates a sense of softening and relief. This is not weakness or lowering standards. This is the recognition that love is a more powerful force for transformation than fear. There is another dimension to compassion in Zen Buddhism that deepens our understanding even further. It is the practice of seeing the suffering that lies beneath all harmful behavior. When someone acts in ways that cause pain, there is always suffering at the root of their actions. This does not mean we condone harmful behavior or put ourselves in danger. It means we understand that hurt people hurt people. When we can see through someone's actions to the pain that drives them, we open the door to genuine healing for everyone involved. Let us explore another story that shows how this understanding can transform even the most difficult situations. In a farming village, there lived a baker named Hiroshi who was known for his kind heart and generous spirit. Every morning before dawn, he would light his ovens and begin preparing fresh bread. The warm smell of baking would drift through the village streets, waking people gently. Hiroshi had a simple practice. He would always bake extra loaves each day and leave them on a wooden shelf outside his shop with a small sign that read, "For those who need them." Travelers, struggling families, and anyone who was hungry could take what they needed without having to ask or explain. One harsh winter, when food was scarce and many villagers were struggling, a group of desperate men began stealing from shops and homes. They would come in the night, taking whatever they could find. The village lived in fear, and many people began locking their doors and hiding their valuables. Hiroshi's shop was robbed 3 times in 2 weeks. Each time, the thieves took not just the free bread from the shelf, but also coins from his cash box and flour from his stores. The 3rd time, they also broke several of his baking tools and overturned his workspace. The other villagers were outraged on Hiroshi's behalf. "You must stop leaving bread outside," they told him. "You are just encouraging them. Put bars on your windows. Get a guard dog. Show these criminals that you will not be an easy target." But Hiroshi continued his practice. Each morning he would clean up any damage, repair what he could, and bake his bread as usual. He still left the extra loaves on the shelf outside, though now they disappeared even more quickly. One particularly cold night, Hiroshi was working late, preparing dough for the next day's baking. He heard a sound at his door and saw shadows moving outside. Instead of hiding or calling for help, he did something that surprised even himself. He opened the door. 3 men stood there, their faces gaunt with hunger and their clothes torn from living rough in the winter forest. They had clearly come to steal again, but they froze when they saw Hiroshi looking at them directly. "You must be very hungry," Hiroshi said softly, "to be out on such a cold night." The men did not know how to respond. They had expected to find the shop empty, to take what they needed and disappear back into the darkness. They had not expected kindness. "I have fresh soup cooking," Hiroshi continued, "and there is warm bread just out of the oven. Would you like to come in and eat?" The oldest of the 3 men, who seemed to be their leader, looked suspicious. "Why would you help us? Do you not know who we are? We are the ones who have been taking from you." Hiroshi nodded calmly. "I know. And I can see that you take only what you need to survive. A man does not steal bread because he is evil. He steals bread because he is hungry." He stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. "The winter is hard for everyone, but it does not have to make us into enemies." Slowly, cautiously, the 3 men entered the warm bakery. Hiroshi served them bowl after bowl of hot soup and all the fresh bread they could eat. As they warmed up and filled their empty stomachs, they began to talk. They had all lost their livelihoods when the local mine closed. With no work available and their savings gone, they had been forced to live in the forest. They had tried asking for help, but the villagers chased them away. Stealing seemed like their only option for survival. "We never wanted to hurt anyone," the youngest one said, his eyes filling with tears. "We just did not want to starve." Hiroshi listened to their story with deep attention. When they finished eating, he made an offer that astonished them. "I could use help with the early morning baking," he said. "The work is hard and the hours are long, but there is always enough food and a warm place to sleep in the room above the shop. If you are willing to work, you are welcome to stay." The 3 men looked at each other in disbelief. They had come to steal from this man, and he was offering them jobs and shelter. The oldest man shook his head slowly. "Why would you trust us? We have robbed you multiple times." Hiroshi smiled gently. "Because I believe that people do better when they are given the chance to do better. You stole because you were desperate. But desperation is not who you are. It is just a situation you were in." The men stayed. They worked harder than any employees Hiroshi had ever had, grateful beyond words for the chance to earn an honest living. Within a few months, the bakery was more prosperous than ever. The village was safer, and the former thieves had become respected members of the community. Years later, when people asked Hiroshi why he had chosen kindness over punishment, he would say, "Fear creates more fear. Anger creates more anger. But compassion has the power to transform even the most difficult situations. When we respond to suffering with understanding instead of judgment, we give everyone involved the chance to become better than they were before." This story reveals something profound about the nature of compassion in Zen Buddhism. true compassion is not just feeling sorry for others or being nice when it is easy. It is the wisdom to see that underneath every harmful action is some form of suffering, and the courage to respond to that suffering with understanding rather than punishment. Hiroshi understood something that the other villagers missed. The thieves were not evil people who enjoyed causing harm. They were human beings caught in desperate circumstances, acting out of pain and need rather than malice. When he responded to their actions with compassion instead of anger, he created the conditions for genuine transformation. This teaching shows us that compassion is not weakness or allowing ourselves to be taken advantage of. It is a powerful force that can change situations that seem hopeless. When we meet aggression with more aggression, we only create more conflict. But when we can see through someone's harmful behavior to the pain that drives it, we open the door to healing for everyone involved. This does not mean we accept harmful behavior or put ourselves in danger. Hiroshi still protected himself by meeting the men directly rather than leaving himself vulnerable. But he combined wise boundaries with genuine understanding of their suffering. The deep peace that Zen Buddhism offers comes partly from this understanding. When we learn to respond to difficulty with compassion, we stop adding our own anger and fear to the world's suffering. Instead, we become agents of healing and transformation. Think about the difficult people in your own life. What suffering might lie beneath their challenging behavior? What pain might drive their actions? This does not excuse harm, but it helps us understand it. And in that understanding, we often find a path toward resolution that anger alone could never reveal. Let your body soften a little more as you rest with this teaching. Feel how compassion, both for yourself and others, creates a spaciousness in the heart. This is not about becoming a doormat or accepting mistreatment. It is about understanding that suffering is at the root of most harmful behavior, and that responding to suffering with understanding is more effective than responding with judgment. The compassion that begins with ourselves naturally extends outward to embrace all beings. When we stop judging our own struggles, we become more patient with the struggles of others. When we learn to forgive our own mistakes, we develop the capacity to forgive those who have hurt us. When we discover that our own suffering deserves understanding rather than punishment, we begin to see that the same is true for everyone. This is the gift that Zen Buddhism offers. Not just techniques for personal improvement, but a completely different way of relating to ourselves and our experience. A way that leads inevitably to the deep rest that comes when the heart finally feels safe to be at peace. As you rest here now, bring your awareness to your heart center. Imagine breathing in and out through your heart. With each inhalation, draw in compassion for yourself. With each exhalation, send compassion out to all beings who are suffering in this moment. You do not need to force anything or make anything happen. Simply rest with the intention of kindness. Let this intention be like a gentle light that softens everything it touches. Notice how your body feels when you hold yourself and others with compassion. There is often a softening in the chest, a release of tension in the shoulders, a quieting of the worried mind. This is the physical expression of compassion, the body's natural response to being held with care rather than judgment. The path of Zen Buddhism is often called the path of the awakened heart. This awakening is not just about understanding concepts or achieving certain states of consciousness. It is about the heart's gradual opening to embrace all of life with compassion and wisdom. Akiko awakened when she learned to treat herself with kindness. Hiroshi embodied this awakening when he offered food and shelter to those who had harmed him. Both discovered that compassion is not something we have to create from nothing. It is our natural state when the barriers of fear and judgment are removed. Rest in this knowing. Let the barriers soften. Allow compassion to flow naturally, first toward yourself, then outward to embrace all beings. This is the path of Zen, and it begins right here, right now, with this gentle breath and this open heart. In Zen Buddhism, there is a teaching that seems paradoxical at first. It tells us that we can love deeply without clinging, care passionately without grasping, value things without needing to possess them forever. This teaching is about the difference between attachment and appreciation, between holding tightly and holding lightly. Most of us confuse love with ownership. We think that if we truly care about something, we must hold on to it with all our strength. We believe that letting go means we did not care enough. But Zen shows us that the opposite is true. Our tight grip often destroys what we are trying to preserve. Think of holding sand in your hand. When you grasp it tightly, it slips through your fingers. When you hold your hand open and relaxed, the sand stays. This is how it is with everything we love. The tighter we cling, the more we suffer. The more we can appreciate without grasping, the more freedom and peace we find. This teaching does not ask us to stop caring about things or people. It invites us to care in a way that allows for change, for loss, for the natural flow of life. When we can hold our loves and values lightly, we discover a deeper kind of devotion, one that is not poisoned by fear of loss. Let us explore a story that shows how this teaching unfolded in the life of a dedicated scholar. In a remote mountain monastery, there lived a master named Kenzo who was renowned throughout the region for his vast collection of ancient texts. For over 40 years, he had carefully gathered the rarest Buddhist scriptures, philosophical treatises, and poetry from across the land. Scholars would travel for weeks just to study in his library, which contained treasures that existed nowhere else in the world. The library itself was a work of beauty. Wooden shelves, carved by master craftsmen, reached from floor to ceiling. Each scroll was wrapped in silk and stored with care. The room smelled of cedar and aged paper. Morning light filtered through paper windows, casting a golden glow over centuries of accumulated wisdom. Kenzo would spend his early hours each day in this sacred space, reading by candlelight before the other monks awakened. The texts were not just objects to him. They represented a lifetime of dedication, years of careful searching, and his deepest connection to the wisdom he valued above all else. One autumn night, while the community slept, a terrible fire swept through the monastery. The flames, fed by strong mountain winds, moved with frightening speed. The monks managed to escape safely, but there was no time to save anything else. They stood in the courtyard watching helplessly as their home was consumed. The library burned with particular intensity. All those ancient texts, irreplaceable manuscripts, and precious scrolls turned to ash in minutes. 40 years of careful collecting vanished in a single night. As dawn broke over the smoldering ruins, the monks gathered around their teacher, expecting to find him devastated by this immense loss. They knew how much the library meant to Kenzo, how he had devoted his life to gathering and preserving those teachings. Instead, they found Kenzo sitting calmly on a stone, watching smoke rise from where his beloved library had stood. His face showed no trace of anger, grief, or regret. He looked peaceful, almost serene. One young monk, unable to contain his confusion, approached with tears in his eyes. "Master," the student said, his voice breaking, "how can you be so peaceful? All those precious teachings, all those years of work, everything is gone. Does this loss not break your heart?" Kenzo looked at his student with eyes full of gentle compassion. "My dear friend," he said softly, "those books contained wonderful words about truth, but they were not truth itself. The real teaching was never written on paper or stored on shelves. It lives here." He touched his chest. "And here." He gestured to his student's heart. "Fire cannot burn what is truly precious." The young monk persisted. "But Master, think of all the wisdom that is lost forever. Future generations will never be able to read those texts." Kenzo smiled peacefully. "The fire has given us a great teaching. It has shown us the difference between the finger pointing at the moon and the moon itself. We spent so much time polishing and protecting the finger that we sometimes forgot to look at what it was pointing toward." He stood slowly and placed a gentle hand on the young monk's shoulder. "Yesterday I was the keeper of books. Today I am simply a teacher. Yesterday I worried about preserving old wisdom. Today I am free to embody it directly. The fire has not taken anything away. It has revealed what was always here." Over the following days, as the community began rebuilding, something remarkable happened. Without the distraction of managing and protecting his vast collection, Kenzo's teaching became more direct and powerful than ever before. Students who had traveled expecting to study ancient texts instead encountered a living embodiment of the wisdom those texts had tried to capture. The master had discovered that his attachment to preserving wisdom had, in subtle ways, prevented him from fully expressing it. The fire had freed him from being a curator of truth and allowed him to become truth itself. This story illuminates something profound about the nature of attachment in Zen practice. True acceptance is not about liking what happens to us. Kenzo did not celebrate the fire or pretend he was happy about losing his library. Instead, he accepted the reality of what had occurred and opened himself to whatever wisdom it might contain. In Zen, we learn that resistance to what has already happened is the source of our deepest suffering. We waste precious energy fighting battles that were already won or lost. When we stop this futile struggle against reality, we discover an inner freedom that no external circumstance can touch. The fire in this story represents all the unexpected losses and changes that life brings us. Sometimes life burns away our cherished plans, our familiar identities, or our treasured possessions. Our first instinct is to see these events as tragedies, as enemies of our happiness. But Zen teaches us to look deeper. What if every loss is also a liberation? What if what burns away was only binding us? Kenzo discovered that his attachment to preserving wisdom had become an obstacle to embodying it. The fire freed him from being a keeper of truth and allowed him to become truth itself. This teaching extends to every area of our lives. When we lose something we thought defined us, we might discover capacities we never knew we had. When a familiar path ends, we might find ourselves on a journey that serves us better. When what we were clinging to slips through our fingers, we might discover that our hands are now free to receive something new. The practice of non-attachment begins with a simple recognition. What has already happened has already happened. Our resistance cannot change the past, but our acceptance can transform our future. When we stop fighting what is, we become available to what might be. Take a gentle breath now. Feel how your body naturally relaxes when you stop bracing against what cannot be changed. This is the physical sensation of letting go. Not collapse, but a wise yielding that conserves your energy for what truly matters. There is another dimension to this teaching about letting go that Zen Buddhism offers us. It is the understanding that our need to control outcomes often prevents us from discovering the natural perfection that wants to emerge. When we can work with what appears instead of forcing predetermined results, we often create something far more beautiful than we could have planned. Let us explore another story that shows how this teaching transformed the work of a master craftsman. Master Aishin was known throughout the region as the most skilled calligrapher in generations. People would travel for days to commission a piece of his work, and his scrolls were treasured by collectors and temples alike. His brushstrokes seemed to flow directly from some deep source, creating characters of extraordinary beauty and power. Aishin took great pride in his art. He would spend hours preparing his ink to the perfect consistency, selecting brushes with ideal flexibility, and waiting for precisely the right mental state before beginning any important piece. His studio was arranged with meticulous care, every tool in its proper place. One spring morning, a wealthy merchant commissioned Aishin to create a scroll for his daughter's wedding. It was to be the most important piece Aishin had ever attempted. The merchant requested specific characters, meaning eternal happiness, in Aishin's most elaborate style, and offered substantial payment. Aishin prepared for days. He fasted to purify his mind, meditated to calm his spirit, and practiced the characters hundreds of times on ordinary paper. When he finally felt ready, he laid out his finest silk scroll, prepared his most precious ink, and selected his most beloved brush. As he began the first character, everything felt perfect. His hand moved with fluid grace, the ink flowed like liquid silk, and the character emerged with stunning beauty. Aishin's heart swelled with satisfaction. This would be his masterpiece, the piece that would establish his reputation for generations. But as he moved to the second character, disaster struck. A sudden gust of wind through the open window knocked over his water bowl. The water splashed across the scroll, creating a large, dark stain right through the center of his perfect first character. Aishin stared at the ruined scroll in horror. Weeks of preparation destroyed in an instant. The silk was expensive and rare. The commission was crucial. And worst of all, the perfect character he had created was completely destroyed. His first impulse was to rage at the wind, at his carelessness in leaving the window open, at the cruel timing of the accident. He could try to clean the scroll, but the damage was permanent. He could start over, but he had no more silk of this quality, and the merchant expected the piece within days. As Aishin sat staring at the damaged scroll, feeling his dreams of the perfect masterpiece crumble, something shifted in his perspective. He looked more closely at the water stain. It had created an organic, flowing shape that seemed to move across the silk like a cloud or a mountain silhouette. The stain had its own beauty, natural and unplanned. Instead of throwing the scroll away, Aishin picked up his brush again. He began to work with the accident rather than against it. He incorporated the water stain into his design, using it as the foundation for an entirely different kind of composition. Where he had planned formal perfection, he now created something wild and spontaneous. The characters he painted around and through the stain had a freedom and energy unlike anything he had ever produced. Instead of trying to control every brushstroke, he let his hand respond to what was already on the silk. The accident became a partner in creation rather than an enemy of it. When Aishin finished, he had created something far more beautiful than his original plan. The piece had life and movement that his careful, controlled work had never achieved. The water stain, which had seemed like complete disaster, had freed him from his perfectionism and allowed his true artistic spirit to emerge. The merchant was amazed when he saw the finished work. "Master Aishin," he said, "I have seen many examples of your art, but this is beyond anything you have created before. How did you achieve such spontaneous beauty?" Aishin smiled, remembering his initial horror at the accident. "I stopped trying to force perfection and started allowing perfection to create itself. The stain taught me that my greatest obstacle was not imperfection, but my fear of it. When I let go of needing to control every detail, my art became truly alive." From that day forward, Aishin's work changed completely. He still practiced diligently and prepared carefully, but he no longer tried to force predetermined outcomes. He learned to dance with accidents, to welcome the unexpected, and to see imperfection as a doorway to deeper creativity. This story shows us how letting go transforms not just our relationship with external things, but our relationship with ourselves and our own efforts. Aishin discovered that his attachment to perfection was actually preventing him from creating truly beautiful art. His fear of making mistakes was keeping him from the spontaneous creativity that emerges when we trust the natural flow of life. This teaching reaches into every corner of our lives. How often do we miss opportunities for joy because we are too focused on avoiding problems? How many relationships become strained because we try too hard to control how they unfold? How much creative energy do we waste trying to force outcomes instead of responding skillfully to what actually happens? Zen Buddhism teaches us that our greatest suffering comes from fighting reality instead of flowing with it. When Aishin stopped battling the water stain and started working with it, he discovered possibilities he never could have imagined. When we stop demanding that life match our expectations and start engaging creatively with what actually shows up, we find a freedom and aliveness that no amount of control could provide. This is why letting go is so central to finding deep peace. It is not about giving up on life or becoming passive. It is about recognizing that our tight grip on how things should be often prevents us from seeing how beautiful they already are. It is about trusting that life knows something about unfolding that our worried minds cannot grasp. The peace that comes from this understanding is profound because it does not depend on circumstances being a certain way. Whether the library burns or stands, whether the water spills or not, we can find our way to contentment by working skillfully with whatever appears. As you rest now in this teaching, feel into any places where you might be gripping too tightly. Where might your fear of loss or imperfection be creating unnecessary tension? What would it feel like to soften that grip just a little? This is not about becoming careless or indifferent. Aishin still valued his art deeply, just as Kenzo valued wisdom. But when we love something without needing to possess or control it completely, when we care without grasping, we discover a way of being that is both deeply engaged and profoundly peaceful. Let yourself rest in this possibility. The deepest teachings of Zen Buddhism point toward this freedom, this ability to hold life lightly while embracing it fully. In this balance between caring and releasing, between effort and surrender, we find the peace that allows both the body and mind to rest completely, knowing that whatever comes, we have the wisdom to meet it with an open heart. There is another layer to this teaching about non-attachment that reveals itself as we practice. It is the understanding that our identity itself is something we hold too tightly. We cling to ideas about who we are, what defines us, what makes us valuable. And this clinging creates a prison of our own making. Kenzo's identity was wrapped up in being the keeper of precious texts. Aishin's sense of self was built around being a perfect calligrapher. When circumstances challenged these identities, they had a choice. They could fight desperately to maintain their old self-concepts, or they could let go and discover who they were without those definitions. Both chose to let go, and both discovered that they were much more than the roles they had been playing. Kenzo found he was not just a librarian, but a living embodiment of wisdom. Aishin discovered he was not just a craftsman of perfect strokes, but an artist capable of spontaneous beauty. This teaching invites us to examine our own attachments to identity. Who would you be if you lost your job title? Your role in your family? Your achievements or possessions? These losses feel threatening because we have confused these external markers with our essential self. But Zen teaches us that our true nature is not found in any role or achievement. It is not in what we do or what we own or how others see us. Our true nature is the awareness itself, the consciousness that experiences all of these temporary roles and identities, but is not limited by any of them. When we loosen our grip on fixed ideas about who we are, we discover a freedom that is both exhilarating and peaceful. We can play different roles, pursue different interests, adapt to changing circumstances, all without losing ourselves. Because the self we discover is not a fixed thing, but the spacious awareness that can hold all experiences. There is a Zen saying, "Let go or be dragged." This captures something essential about the nature of attachment. Life is constantly changing. Everything we love will eventually change or end. We can resist this truth, clinging desperately to what we have, trying to freeze time and preserve what we cherish. But this resistance is futile. Change will happen whether we accept it or not. The question is whether we will let go gracefully and move with the current of change, or whether we will cling and be dragged painfully through inevitable transformations. This is our choice in every moment. Kenzo let go. He did not try to run back into the burning building to save his precious books. He did not spend years mourning what was lost or raging against the unfairness of it. He released his attachment and immediately found peace. This does not mean he did not care about the books. He had devoted 40 years to collecting them, but he cared about them without clinging to them. When they were gone, he could appreciate what they had given him while they were present, and he could release them when they were not. This is the practice of non-attachment. Not caring less, but caring without clinging. Not loving less deeply, but loving without the fear and possessiveness that turn love into suffering. Not working less diligently, but working without being enslaved by our need for specific outcomes. In Zen practice, we learn non-attachment through many small moments of letting go. We sit in meditation and watch thoughts arise and pass. We do not cling to pleasant thoughts or push away unpleasant ones. We simply watch them come and go like clouds passing through the sky. This is training. Each time we release a thought without following it, we are practicing non-attachment. Each time we notice an emotion arising and allow it to be present without trying to hold on to it or push it away, we are learning to hold life lightly. Over time, this practice in meditation extends into daily life. We begin to notice when we are gripping too tightly, when we are trying to control what cannot be controlled, when we are creating suffering through our attachments, and gradually, we learn to release, to soften, to allow. This does not happen all at once. Non-attachment is not a state we achieve once and maintain forever. It is a practice, a way of being that we return to again and again. Each moment offers a new opportunity to either grip or release, to cling or allow, to suffer from our attachments or find freedom in letting go. As you rest here now, notice if there are places in your body where you are holding tension. Often, physical holding reflects mental and emotional holding. See if you can soften those places, releasing the grip without forcing anything. This is the practice of non-attachment in its most immediate form. Learning to release what we do not need to hold. The peace that comes from practicing non-attachment is unlike any other peace. It does not depend on circumstances being a certain way. It does not require that we get what we want or avoid what we fear. It is the peace of being okay with whatever comes because we know we can work skillfully with any situation. Aishin found this peace when he stopped demanding that his art be perfect according to his preconceived ideas. He discovered he could create beauty with accidents as easily as with careful planning. This freed him from the constant anxiety of trying to control every detail. Kenzo found this peace when he realized that wisdom was not in books, but in being. He could release the books because he had never truly needed them. What was essential had always been present, could never be lost to fire or any other disaster. This is what Zen Buddhism offers us. Not the promise that we will never experience loss or that life will always go our way, but the wisdom to meet whatever comes with an open heart and steady mind. The capacity to appreciate beauty while it is here and release it gracefully when it goes. The freedom to love deeply without the fear and clinging that turn love into bondage. Let your body settle more deeply now into rest. Feel how releasing unnecessary tension allows for a deeper relaxation. This is true for the mind and heart as well. When we release our tight grip on how things should be, we discover a relaxation and ease that goes all the way to our core. The path of Zen invites us to hold all things lightly. Our identities, our possessions, our plans, our preferences. Not because these things do not matter, but because holding them tightly causes suffering while holding them lightly allows for peace. In this light holding, we find the balance between engagement and freedom. We can care deeply and work diligently while remaining free from the anxiety of attachment. We can love fully while allowing the natural changes that come to all things. We can value beauty without needing to possess it forever. This is the wisdom of non-attachment, and it is available to us in every moment, every breath, every gentle release of what we do not need to hold. Rest in this wisdom now, and let it carry you into the peace that waits patiently at the heart of all things. In Zen Buddhism, there is a teaching that at first seems sad, but reveals itself as profoundly beautiful. It is the teaching of impermanence, the understanding that all things change, all things pass, nothing lasts forever. This might sound like a recipe for sorrow, but Zen shows us something unexpected. The temporary nature of things is not the enemy of beauty or joy. It is actually what makes them precious. Think about a rainbow. Would you love it less because you know it will fade? Or does its fleeting nature make it even more special? When we see a rainbow, we stop what we are doing to appreciate it because we know this moment will not last. The impermanence does not diminish the beauty. It intensifies it. This is true for everything in life. The cherry blossoms that bloom for just a few weeks each spring are treasured precisely because they are brief. If they bloomed all year, we would barely notice them. Their temporary nature reminds us to pay attention, to be present, to appreciate this moment while it is here. Zen Buddhism teaches us that when we truly understand impermanence, we do not love things less. We love them more fully. We stop taking moments for granted because we know each one is unique and will never come again. We treasure our relationships because we understand that our time together is limited. We find ourselves awake to life instead of sleepwalking through it. Let us explore a story that shows how this teaching transformed the way a master gardener related to beauty itself. There once lived a master gardener named Yuki who was famous throughout the region for creating the most beautiful gardens anyone had ever seen. Her specialty was cherry trees, and people would travel from distant provinces just to walk through her gardens during the brief cherry blossom season. Yuki had spent 40 years perfecting her art. She knew exactly which varieties of cherry trees would bloom at different times, creating waves of color that lasted for weeks. She understood how to shape the trees so their blossoms would frame mountain views perfectly. She had created stone paths that guided visitors to see each tree from its most beautiful angle. But Yuki had a problem that troubled her deeply. Every year, just as her gardens reached their peak beauty, the cherry blossoms would begin to fall. Within days, the magnificent display she had worked all year to create would be gone, leaving only green leaves where stunning flowers had been. The fleeting nature of the blossoms filled her with sadness and frustration. Why must something so beautiful last such a short time? She would ask herself as she swept fallen petals from her paths. If only I could make the blossoms stay longer, then people could truly appreciate their beauty. Yuki began experimenting with ways to extend the blooming period. She tried different fertilizers, built small shelters to protect the flowers from wind and rain, and even attempted to coat some blossoms with a clear substance to preserve them. But nothing worked. The cherry blossoms followed their natural rhythm, blooming gloriously and then falling away, regardless of her efforts to control them. One spring morning, as Yuki was sadly sweeping up another pile of fallen petals, an old monk appeared on the path. He was walking slowly, stopping frequently to look at the trees, even though most of the blossoms had already fallen. "Excuse me," Yuki called to him. "You have come too late. The peak blooming was last week. There is not much left to see now." The monk looked surprised. "Too late? But I can see many beautiful things right now." He gestured toward a tree where the last few blossoms clung to branches that were already showing fresh green leaves. "Look how lovely this is. The old blossoms saying goodbye while new life begins." Yuki looked where he was pointing, but saw only the remnants of what had been much more beautiful days earlier. "But you should have seen it last week when all the trees were in full bloom. That was when it was truly magnificent." The old monk smiled and sat down on a stone bench beneath the nearly bare tree. "Tell me about that day." Yuki's eyes lit up as she described the peak bloom. Every tree was covered in perfect pink and white flowers. The air was filled with their delicate fragrance. Visitors walked the paths in wonder, some of them with tears in their eyes from the beauty. It was like paradise itself. "It sounds wonderful," the monk said. "And how did you feel during that perfect day?" Yuki paused, remembering. "I felt anxious, actually. Even while people were praising the beauty, I was worried about how long it would last. I kept looking for signs that the petals were beginning to fall. I could not fully enjoy the moment because I was already dreading its end." The monk nodded thoughtfully. "And how do you feel now, a week later?" "Sad. Empty. Like the whole year of work was wasted because the beauty was so brief." The old monk was quiet for a long moment, watching a few remaining petals drift slowly to the ground. Then he asked, "What if the shortness of the blooming is not the enemy of beauty, but the source of it?" Yuki looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Tell me," the monk said. "Would people travel from distant provinces to see cherry blossoms if they bloomed all year long? Would visitors walk your paths with tears in their eyes if the flowers lasted for months? Would you treasure the sight of full bloom if it was always available?" Yuki had never considered this perspective. "I suppose not. If cherry blossoms bloomed constantly, they would become ordinary." "Exactly," the monk smiled. "The very thing that causes you sadness, the brief nature of the blossoms, is what makes them so precious. Their beauty is inseparable from their impermanence. When people see cherry blossoms, they are not just seeing pretty flowers. They are seeing the truth that all beautiful things pass away, and this knowledge makes the beauty even more meaningful." He gestured toward the nearly bare tree above them. "This tree will give you a new gift now. In a few weeks, it will offer fresh green shade for summer visitors. In autumn, it will display brilliant colored leaves. In winter, it will show you the elegant structure of its bare branches. Each season has its own beauty, but only because each season lets go when its time is finished." As they sat together, Yuki began to see her garden with different eyes. The fallen petals on the path were not just debris to be cleaned up, but evidence of beauty that had been fully expressed and completed. The green leaves beginning to emerge were not inferior replacements for flowers, but the next chapter in the tree's ongoing story. "I have been fighting against the very thing that makes my garden special," she realized. "I wanted to stop time at the moment of peak beauty, but that would destroy what makes the beauty powerful." The monk stood up to continue his walk. The cherry blossoms have been teaching the deepest truth about life for centuries. They show us that because things pass away, each moment is irreplaceable. Because beauty is temporary, it deserves our complete attention and appreciation. When we truly understand impermanence, we do not love things less. We love them more fully. From that day forward, Yuki's relationship with her garden completely transformed. She still worked carefully to create the best conditions for blooming, but she no longer fought against the natural cycle of flowering and fading. During peak bloom, instead of worrying about when it would end, she would sit quietly among the trees and drink in their beauty completely. When the petals began to fall, instead of feeling sad, she would appreciate the graceful way the blossoms completed their brief dance and made space for what came next. Visitors noticed the change in Yuki. She seemed more present and peaceful, more able to share in their wonder rather than being distracted by her own concerns. The garden itself seemed more beautiful somehow, not because the flowers lasted longer, but because the gardener had learned to love them exactly as they were, temporary and perfect. This story reveals one of the most profound teachings in Zen Buddhism about the nature of impermanence. We often think that if we could make beautiful moments last forever, we would be happier. But the truth is exactly opposite. The temporary nature of experiences is what gives them their preciousness and power to move us. When we truly understand impermanence, we stop wasting energy trying to grasp and hold on to fleeting moments and instead learn to be fully present for them while they are here. Like Yuki discovering that her anxiety about losing the blossoms was preventing her from enjoying them, we often miss the beauty of the present moment because we are worried about its ending. This teaching transforms how we relate to everything we love. Instead of being paralyzed by the knowledge that good times will not last forever, we can be liberated by it. Each moment becomes precious precisely because it will not come again. Each experience with loved ones becomes meaningful because our time together is limited. Each day becomes a gift because we know it is not guaranteed. The understanding of impermanence in Zen is not meant to make us sad or pessimistic. It is meant to wake us up to the incredible value of what is happening right now. When we stop fighting against the natural flow of change and instead learn to appreciate each stage of life's unfolding, we find a deeper peace and gratitude than any attempt to freeze time could ever provide. Take a gentle breath and feel how this understanding creates both tenderness and appreciation for this moment. Notice how knowing that this peaceful time will not last forever makes it more precious, not less. This is the gift that accepting impermanence offers us. There is another dimension to this teaching about impermanence that Zen Buddhism reveals. It is the understanding that knowing our time is limited can actually make us more alive, more present, more capable of treasuring the gift of existence. When we deeply accept that death is real and could come at any time, we stop postponing our lives. Most of us live as if we have unlimited time. We put off important conversations, delay pursuing our dreams, rush through daily experiences while planning for some future when we will finally slow down and appreciate what we have. But this future never comes because we carry the same habits forward. When we truly accept the reality of impermanence, including our own mortality, everything changes. We stop taking moments for granted. We become present for the people and experiences in our lives. We find ourselves awake and engaged instead of sleepwalking through our days. Let us explore another story that shows how this teaching can transform the way we experience life. In a mountain village, there lived an old doctor named Kenji who had spent his entire career caring for the people of his community. He had delivered their babies, treated their illnesses, and comforted their families through times of loss. Now, in his 70s, Dr. Kenji had developed a serious illness of his own, and he knew he had only a few months left to live. Many people expected Dr. Kenji to become depressed or bitter about his diagnosis. After spending his life healing others, it seemed cruel that he should face a disease that could not be cured. But instead of becoming despondent, something surprising happened. Dr. Kenji seemed to come alive in a way that his friends and patients had never seen before. Every morning, he would wake up and spend time looking out his window at the mountains, as if seeing them for the first time. He would savor his simple breakfast with obvious pleasure, paying attention to tastes and textures he had barely noticed for decades. When neighbors came to visit, he would listen to their stories with complete attention, as if each conversation was the most important thing in the world. Dr. Kenji also began doing things he had always said he did not have time for. he started painting watercolors of the mountain views from his house. He wrote long letters to old friends he had not contacted in years. He spent hours sitting with children in the village, telling them stories and listening to their dreams. His assistant, a young nurse named May, was puzzled by this transformation. One afternoon, as Dr. Kenji was carefully painting a picture of a single flower in a small vase, she asked him about the change she had observed. "Doctor, forgive me for asking, but you seem happier now than I have ever seen you, even though you are facing such a difficult situation. How is this possible?" Dr. Kenji set down his brush and smiled at the young woman. "May, do you know what I discovered when I learned I was dying?" "What?" "I discovered that I had been dying all along. We all are. The only difference is that now I know approximately how much time I have left, and this knowledge has become a great teacher." May looked confused, so Dr. Kenji continued. "For 70 years, I lived as if I had unlimited time. I would put off conversations with old friends, thinking I would call them next month. I would rush through meals to get to the next task, assuming I could enjoy food properly someday when I was not so busy. I would notice beautiful sunsets, but barely pause to appreciate them, believing there would always be another sunset tomorrow." He gestured toward the flower he had been painting. "But when you know your time is limited, everything becomes precious. This flower will fade in a few days, and I might not be here to see many more flowers after that. So I paint it now, with complete attention, as if it is the most important flower that ever bloomed." Dr. Kenji stood up and walked to the window. "Look at those mountains, May. I have seen them every day for 40 years, but I was usually too preoccupied to really see them. Now that I know I will not be looking at them much longer, each time I see them feels like a miracle." May began to understand. "You are saying that knowing about death makes life more meaningful?" "Not just knowing about death intellectually, but really accepting that our time is limited," Dr. Kenji clarified. "Most people know they will die someday, but they live as if they have forever. When you truly accept impermanence, not as a sad fact, but as the thing that makes each moment irreplaceable, everything changes." He returned to his painting, adding careful details to the flower's petals. "I am not happy because I am dying, May. I am happy because I am finally truly living. For the first time in decades, I am not postponing my life, waiting for some perfect moment to begin appreciating what I have. I am here now, completely present for whatever time remains." Over the following weeks, May watched Dr. Kenji continue to embrace each day with remarkable presence and gratitude. He never seemed to waste a moment on regret or self-pity. Instead, he poured his full attention into whatever he was doing, whether it was having a conversation, eating a meal, or simply watching clouds move across the sky. When Dr. Kenji's condition worsened and he became bedridden, his approach remained the same. He would listen carefully to the sounds outside his window, appreciating birdsong and wind in the trees as if they were precious music. When visitors came, he would look into their eyes with complete attention, making each person feel like they were the most important person in the world. On his final day, Dr. Kenji called May to his bedside. "I want to thank you for caring for me during these months," he said. "And I want to share one last thing with you." "What is that, doctor?" "Do not wait until you are dying to start really living. The knowledge that time is precious does not have to come from a terminal diagnosis. Every day is terminal in the sense that each day that passes is gone forever. If you can remember this, Not as a morbid thought, but as a reminder of how valuable each moment is. You will live more fully than most people ever do. Dr. Kenji died peacefully that evening, and those who had witnessed his final months said they had never seen anyone face death with such grace and aliveness. His example became a teaching for the entire village about how understanding impermanence can transform the way we experience life. This profound story shows us how accepting the reality of death can paradoxically make us more alive. Dr. Kenji's transformation illustrates one of the most important insights in Zen Buddhism. When we truly understand that our time is limited, we stop taking moments for granted and begin to experience life with much greater richness and presence. Most of us live with what we might call an illusion of immortality. We know intellectually that we will not live forever, but we behave as if we have unlimited time. We postpone important conversations, delay pursuing our dreams, and rush through daily experiences while planning for some future when we will finally slow down and appreciate what we have. But when we deeply accept impermanence, not just as a concept, but as a lived reality, everything changes. Like Dr. Kenji savoring his breakfast or painting flowers with complete attention, we begin to approach each experience as if it might be our last, because in a very real sense, it might be. This moment, exactly as it is right now, will never come again. The teaching of impermanence in Zen Buddhism is ultimately about learning to love life more completely by understanding its temporary nature. Like cherry blossoms being more beautiful because they fade quickly, our experiences become more meaningful when we recognize they will not last forever. This wisdom naturally leads to the kind of presence and gratitude that allows the heart and mind to rest deeply. When we are fully present for this moment, instead of anxiously planning the future or regretting the past, we find the peace that has always been available right here, right now. As you settle into this teaching, feel how accepting impermanence creates a sense of both tenderness and appreciation for your life exactly as it is. You do not need to wait for perfect circumstances or a diagnosis to begin treasuring each breath, each moment of awareness, each opportunity to experience the simple miracle of being alive. Let your awareness rest in this moment. Notice the sensation of breathing. Feel the surface supporting your body. Hear whatever sounds are present. This moment, exactly as it is already complete. It does not need to last forever to be perfect. Its very impermanence makes it precious. The cherry blossoms bloom and fall. The seasons turn. All things arise and pass away. This is not a tragedy. It is the nature of existence. And when we stop fighting against this truth, when we learn to appreciate the beauty of impermanence itself, we find a peace that embraces all of life, the blooming and the fading, the arriving and the leaving, the living and the dying. Rest in this understanding. You are alive in this moment. That is enough. That has always been enough. And the wisdom to know this is what Zen Buddhism offers, not as something far away or difficult to achieve, but as the natural recognition that comes when we finally stop running from impermanence and learn to dance with it instead. Breathe gently. Rest deeply. And know that this moment, fleeting as it is, contains everything you need to be at peace. In Zen Buddhism, there is an important distinction between two kinds of knowledge. The first is knowledge about something, the information and concepts we gather in our minds. The second is direct knowing, the intimate understanding that comes from lived experience. This difference might seem subtle, but it is actually the difference between reading about water and drinking it, between studying love and loving someone. We live in a time when information is everywhere. We can learn about anything with a few clicks. We can read books about meditation, study theories about enlightenment, memorize teachings from ancient masters. But Zen asks us a challenging question. Does all this knowledge about spiritual truth bring us any closer to experiencing truth directly? A person can read 1,000 books about swimming and never get wet. They can study the physics of water, learn the proper techniques, memorize every stroke. But until they actually enter the water and swim, all that knowledge remains abstract. It is the same with Zen practice. We can study Buddhism for years and still remain strangers to the very truth the teachings point toward. This is why Zen emphasizes direct experience over intellectual understanding. The teachings are like fingers pointing at the moon. They are useful guides, but if we spend all our time studying the finger, we miss the moon entirely. At some point, we must stop reading about truth and start experiencing it for ourselves. Let us explore a story that shows the difference between these two kinds of knowing. Deep in the mountains, there lived a scholar named Hayato who had devoted his entire life to studying Buddhist philosophy. His small house was packed from floor to ceiling with ancient texts, commentaries, and volumes of teachings from every school of Buddhist thought. He could recite complex arguments from memory and explain the most subtle points of doctrine with impressive precision. Hayato spent his days reading, taking notes, and writing his own commentaries on the great works of Buddhist literature. He had developed a reputation as one of the most learned Buddhist scholars in the region. Students would occasionally make the difficult journey to his mountain retreat to study with him, hoping to benefit from his vast knowledge. But despite all his learning, Hayato felt something was missing. His understanding was complete in theory, but he often felt as confused about life as anyone else. When faced with daily problems or difficult emotions, his scholarly knowledge seemed to offer little practical help. He could explain the nature of suffering in elaborate detail, but he still suffered. He could describe the path to enlightenment perfectly, but he felt far from enlightened. One winter morning, an old woman appeared at Hayato's door. She was bent with age, dressed in simple farmer's clothes, and carrying a small bundle of vegetables. She looked like any other village farmer, certainly not someone who would have anything to teach a great scholar. "Excuse me, sir," she said in a humble voice. "I have been walking all night through the snow, and I am very cold and tired. Might I sit by your fire for a while to warm myself?" Hayato was annoyed by the interruption to his studies, but his Buddhist training had taught him the importance of compassion. He reluctantly allowed the woman to enter and sit by his small hearth. As she warmed herself, the old woman noticed the books covering every surface of the room. "My," she said with apparent amazement, "you must be very wise to have read so many books about Buddhism." Hayato's chest swelled with pride. "Yes," he said. "I have studied Buddhist philosophy for over 30 years. I know the teachings of all the great masters. There is probably no question about Buddhist doctrine that I cannot answer." The old woman looked impressed. "How wonderful! I am just a simple farmer, but I have always wondered about something. Perhaps you could help me understand." "Of course," Hayato said, pleased to have an opportunity to demonstrate his knowledge to someone who would surely be amazed by his wisdom. The woman was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. Then she asked, "What is Buddha?" Hayato launched into an elaborate explanation. He spoke about the historical Buddha, about Buddha nature, about the different bodies of Buddha in various philosophical systems. He quoted ancient texts and cited famous masters. He spoke for nearly an hour, covering every aspect of Buddhahood that his scholarly training had taught him. When he finished, he looked at the old woman expectantly, waiting for her to express amazement at his learning. But she simply looked confused. "I am sorry," she said apologetically, "but I still do not understand. You have told me many things about Buddha, but you have not told me what Buddha is." Hayato felt a flash of irritation. "I just explained it in great detail. Perhaps you were not listening carefully enough. Buddha is the awakened one, the one who achieved complete enlightenment, the teacher who showed us the path to liberation from suffering." Yes, the old woman interrupted gently. "But what is Buddha? Not what Buddha did or what Buddha teaches, but what Buddha is." Hayato tried again, this time using different terminology and approaching the question from various philosophical angles. But no matter how he explained it, the woman kept asking the same simple question. "But what is Buddha?" After 2 hours of increasingly frustrated explanations, Hayato finally snapped. "Look, old woman, if you cannot understand such basic Buddhist concepts, perhaps you should stick to farming and leave philosophy to those who are capable of grasping it." The elderly woman looked at him with eyes that suddenly seemed much wiser and deeper than before. "My dear scholar," she said softly, "you have spent 30 years learning about Buddha, but you have never met Buddha. You can describe Buddha perfectly, but you do not know what Buddha is." She stood up slowly and gathered her small bundle. "True understanding is not found in books or explanations. It is found in direct experience. You know what Buddha did and what Buddha taught, but you do not know what Buddha is because you have never looked inside yourself to find the Buddha nature that lives there." As she walked toward the door, she turned back with a gentle smile. "I am just a simple farmer, as you said. I cannot read your books or explain your philosophies. But when I work in my garden, I know Buddha. When I sit quietly in the evening, I meet Buddha. When I help a neighbor or feed a hungry animal, Buddha is there. I may not know about Buddha, but I know Buddha." With that, the old woman disappeared into the snowy morning, leaving Hayato alone with his thousands of books and his suddenly empty-feeling knowledge. For days afterward, Hayato could not concentrate on his studies. The woman's simple question kept echoing in his mind. What is Buddha? He realized that despite all his learning, he truly could not answer this most basic question from direct experience. He knew what others had said about Buddha, but he had never encountered Buddha directly. This encounter changed everything for Hayato. He did not abandon his books entirely, but he began to balance his scholarly study with simple meditation practice. He started paying attention to his daily activities the way the old woman had described, looking for Buddha in ordinary moments rather than just in philosophical texts. Gradually, Hayato's understanding transformed from something he carried in his head to something he experienced in his heart. His knowledge became wisdom not because he learned new information, but because he began to live what he had always known intellectually. This story illuminates one of the most important distinctions in Zen Buddhism, the difference between intellectual knowledge and experiential wisdom. We can study spiritual teachings for years and become experts at explaining them, but this kind of knowledge often remains separate from our actual lived experience. Hayato's encounter with the old woman reveals that true understanding cannot be found in books alone, no matter how many we read or how well we understand them. Wisdom emerges when we stop collecting information about truth and start experiencing truth directly through our own awareness and daily life. The woman in this story represents the kind of simple, direct wisdom that Zen teachings ultimately point toward. She might not have been able to give scholarly lectures about Buddha nature, but she knew Buddha nature intimately through her own experience. Her understanding was living and present, not abstract and theoretical. This teaching is especially important in our modern world, where we have access to more spiritual information than any previous generation. We can read thousands of books, watch countless videos, and attend endless workshops about enlightenment and inner peace. But none of this accumulation of knowledge will bring us the deep peace these teachings promise unless we learn to experience what we are studying. The path of Zen is not about becoming smarter about spirituality. It is about becoming more awake to the reality that is already present in each moment. When we try to understand our way to peace through thinking and analyzing, we often move further away from the direct experience that would actually bring us peace. Take a gentle breath now and notice the difference between thinking about breathing and actually experiencing the breath. This simple distinction points toward the wisdom the old woman was trying to share. Truth is not something we figure out with our minds, but something we encounter with our whole being. There is another dimension to this teaching about direct knowing that deepens our understanding even further. It is the recognition that the most profound wisdom often comes not from accumulating more knowledge, but from living fully with the understanding we already have. A person who embodies simple truths is wiser than a scholar who merely knows complex theories. In Zen practice, we sometimes encounter teachings that seem almost too simple to be valuable. When you are hungry, eat. When you are tired, sleep. When you walk, just walk. These instructions seem obvious, even simplistic, but the depth in them is not in their complexity. It is in actually doing them, in living them completely. Let us explore another story that shows how wisdom lives in ordinary life when we bring full presence to it. There was once a monastery where the monks were known for their intense debates about Buddhist philosophy. Every evening after their work was finished, they would gather in the main hall and engage in elaborate discussions about the nature of reality, the meaning of the teachings, and the proper interpretation of ancient texts. A young monk named Goro particularly loved these debates. He was quick-witted and well-read, and he took great pride in his ability to win arguments and prove other monks wrong. He would spend his days preparing clever points and studying obscure texts so that he could impress everyone with his knowledge during the evening discussions. One day, a new monk arrived at the monastery. His name was Tekkan, and he seemed different from the others. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with weathered hands and a quiet manner that suggested years of hard work rather than scholarly study. During the evening debates, he would sit silently in the back, listening carefully but never participating. This puzzled Goro. How could anyone sit through such fascinating discussions without wanting to contribute? After a week of watching Tekkan's silence, Goro decided to draw him into the conversation. During a particularly heated debate about the nature of emptiness, Goro turned to the newcomer and said, "Brother Tekkan, you have been listening to our discussions all week without saying a word. Surely you must have some opinion about whether phenomena are empty of inherent existence." All eyes turned to Tekkan, who looked slightly uncomfortable at being put on the spot. He was quiet for a long moment before responding. I am sorry, but I do not really understand what you mean by inherent existence. Could you explain it to me? Goro was delighted. Here was a chance to display his knowledge to someone who was clearly less educated than himself. He launched into a detailed explanation of emptiness philosophy, using technical terms and citing ancient masters. When he finished, Tekkan nodded slowly. Thank you for that explanation. But I am still not sure I understand. Can you give me an example of something that has inherent existence and something that does not? Goro was happy to oblige. He spent another 20 minutes providing examples and elaborating on his philosophical understanding. But when he finished, Tekkan asked another simple question that showed he still did not quite grasp the concept. This pattern continued for several evenings. Tekkan would ask innocent questions that seemed to reveal his lack of sophisticated understanding, and Goro would respond with increasingly elaborate explanations. The other monks began to see Tekkan as somewhat simple, unable to grasp the complex ideas that they debated so skillfully. But something strange began to happen. As Goro tried to explain these concepts to someone who seemed to know nothing about philosophy, he found himself having to examine his own understanding more carefully. Tekkan's simple questions forced him to think about what he actually meant by the words he used so confidently. One evening, Tekkan asked a question that stopped Goro in his tracks. Brother Goro, you have explained emptiness to me many times now, and I am grateful for your patience. But I wonder, when you are not explaining emptiness, when you are just living your daily life, how does this understanding change the way you experience washing dishes or sweeping floors? Goro opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. He realized that, despite all his sophisticated explanations, his understanding of emptiness had never actually changed how he experienced ordinary activities. It remained an intellectual concept separate from his lived experience. I am not sure, he admitted, feeling embarrassed for the first time in years. Tekkan smiled gently. Thank you for your honesty. You see, I spent 40 years as a farmer before coming here. I never learned the proper names for Buddhist concepts, and I cannot engage in philosophical debates. But when I plant seeds in empty soil, I experience something that might be what you call emptiness. When I watch crops grow through connection with sun and rain and soil, I see what you might call dependent origination. He paused, looking around at the gathered monks. I came here hoping to learn the names for what I had already experienced in my daily work. But I am starting to think that maybe the names are not the most important thing. Maybe the experience is what matters. The room fell silent. For the first time, many of the monks questioned whether their sophisticated debates were bringing them closer to wisdom or further from it. Do not misunderstand me, Tekkan continued. I am not saying study is worthless. I am grateful for all the explanations you have given me. But I wonder if sometimes we get so interested in talking about truth that we forget to live it. From that night forward, the character of the monastery's evening gatherings began to change. Instead of trying to win debates about concepts, the monks started sharing how their understanding affected their daily experience. Instead of competing to show off their knowledge, they began asking genuine questions about how to live with greater wisdom and compassion. Goro discovered that Tekkan's simple questions had been far more valuable than all his clever arguments. By forcing him to examine what his knowledge actually meant in practical terms, the older monk had helped him begin to transform intellectual understanding into lived wisdom. This story reveals another crucial aspect of wisdom in Zen Buddhism. True understanding is not measured by how much we know or how well we can explain concepts, but by how deeply our knowledge has transformed the way we actually live. Tekkan's approach to learning was the opposite of what we might expect. Instead of trying to accumulate more information, he was trying to connect information to his direct experience. Instead of seeking to impress others with his knowledge, he was genuinely curious about how understanding could improve his daily life. The questions Tekkan asked were more valuable than all of Goro's explanations because they pointed toward the gap between knowing about something and knowing something directly. We can memorize every teaching about compassion, but until we actually become more compassionate in our daily interactions, our knowledge remains incomplete. This teaching offers profound relief because it means we do not need to become scholars or experts to benefit from Zen wisdom. We do not need to understand every philosophical nuance or memorize complex texts. We simply need to take whatever understanding we have, however basic, and begin applying it to our actual experience. The deep peace that these teachings offer comes not from intellectual mastery, but from the gradual transformation of how we meet life moment by moment. When we stop trying to collect spiritual knowledge and start living spiritual principles, we discover that even simple understanding can bring profound changes to our experience. As you rest now in this teaching, notice how it feels to let go of any pressure to understand everything perfectly. The path of Zen is not about becoming an expert in Buddhist philosophy. It is about becoming more awake, more compassionate, and more peaceful in whatever circumstances we find ourselves. The wisdom that brings true transformation is often surprisingly simple. Like the old woman who knew Buddha through her daily work, like Tekkan who understood emptiness through farming, we can find the deepest teachings reflected in our most ordinary activities when we bring genuine attention and care to them. This understanding naturally leads to the kind of peace that allows both the body and mind to rest completely. When we stop struggling to figure everything out with our thinking minds and start experiencing life directly with our whole being, we find the sanctuary of presence that these ancient teachings have always been pointing toward. Let yourself settle more deeply now. There is nothing you need to know that you do not already know. There is nothing you need to become that you are not already. The wisdom of Zen is not hidden in complex philosophies or distant realizations. It is here, in this breath, in this moment, in the simple fact of your own aware presence. Rest in this knowing. You are already home. You have always been home. And the journey of 1,000 miles to discover this simple truth ends exactly where it began, right here, right now, in the ordinary miracle of being alive and aware. In Zen Buddhism, there is a teaching that might seem strange at first. It tells us that we are already complete, already whole, already perfect, exactly as we are. This does not mean we have no room to grow or learn. It means that our essential nature, our deepest self, lacks nothing and has never lacked anything. Most of us spend our lives feeling inadequate, as if we are somehow not enough. We believe we need to achieve more, become more, prove ourselves worthy of love and respect. We chase after accomplishments and acquisitions, thinking that someday when we have done enough or become enough, we will finally feel complete. But Zen teaches us something radical. It says that this feeling of incompleteness is an illusion. We are not broken things that need fixing. We are not empty vessels that need filling. We are already whole, already complete, already enough. The very awareness that reads these words, the consciousness that experiences your life, is perfect and complete just as it is. This teaching can be difficult to accept because we are so used to seeing ourselves through the lens of our flaws and failures. We define ourselves by what we lack rather than recognizing what we already are. But when we learn to see beyond these limited self-concepts, we discover a freedom and peace that does not depend on any external achievement or validation. Let us explore a story that shows how this teaching transformed the way a humble worker saw himself. In the mountains above a small village lived a woodcutter named Daichi who had spent his entire life cutting and selling firewood. Every morning, he would climb the steep forest paths, select trees, and spend the day cutting and splitting wood. Every evening he would return home tired but satisfied with his simple work. Daichi had always thought of himself as just a woodcutter, nothing more. He was not educated like the village scholars, not wealthy like the merchants, not skilled like the craftsmen. When people asked him what he did, he would say simply, "I cut wood. That is all I know how to do." One day, while working deep in the forest, Daichi heard strange sounds coming from a nearby grove. Following the sounds, he discovered a group of monks who had become lost while traveling between monasteries. They were sitting by a small stream, looking worried and confused. Their leader, an elderly abbot, approached Daichi respectfully. "Excuse me, friend. We have been walking for 2 days and cannot find our way back to the main path. Do you know these mountains well?" Daichi nodded. "I have been walking these paths for 40 years. I know every tree and stream in these mountains." The abbot's face lit up with relief. "Could you possibly guide us back to the road that leads to the temple? We would be very grateful for your help." Daichi agreed immediately, though it meant leaving his work for the day. He led the group of 15 monks through paths that seemed completely unmarked to them, but were as familiar to him as the rooms of his own house. As they walked, the monks were amazed by Daichi's knowledge of the forest. "How do you know that this path leads to the main road?" one monk asked as Daichi guided them through what seemed like dense, pathless woods. "I can tell by the way the moss grows on the trees," Daichi explained. "The moss is thicker on the north side, and I know the road runs east to west through this valley. Also, I can hear the sound of the river that runs beside the road." The monks listened carefully, but could hear nothing but forest sounds. Yet, as they continued following Daichi, they indeed came to a river, and soon after, to the main road. As they walked, Daichi continued to share his knowledge naturally. He pointed out which plants could be eaten safely, which ones could heal minor injuries, where the best water could be found, and how to read weather signs in the sky and wind. "You know so much about living in harmony with nature," one young monk said with obvious admiration. "Have you studied these things in books?" Daichi laughed. "I cannot read books. I just pay attention to what the forest teaches me every day. When you spend enough time with trees and streams, they tell you what you need to know." When they reached the road that would lead the monks safely to their destination, the abbot took Daichi's hands in gratitude. "My friend, you have saved us from a very difficult situation. How can we repay your kindness?" "No payment is needed," Daichi said. "I was glad to help." But the abbot was not finished. "You say you are just a woodcutter, but today you have been our teacher. You have shown us wisdom about reading nature that none of our books contain. You have demonstrated compassion by helping strangers without expecting anything in return. You have shared your knowledge freely and guided us with patience. The old monk looked directly into Daichi's eyes. "Tell me, what makes someone a teacher? Is it having read many books, or is it having learned from life and sharing that learning with others who need it?" Daichi was quiet for a long moment, considering this question. "I suppose it is about sharing what you know to help others." "And what makes someone wise?" The abbot continued. "Is it knowing complicated theories, or is it understanding how to live well and peacefully?" Again, Daichi thought carefully. Maybe wisdom is knowing how to work with life instead of fighting against it. The abbot smiled. "Then you are both a teacher and a wise man, whether you call yourself these things or not. You have taught us more in one afternoon than we learned in many days of formal study." As the monks continued on their journey, Daichi walked slowly back into the forest, thinking about what the abbot had said. For 40 years, he had seen himself as just a woodcutter, but the monks had seen him as a teacher and guide. Which view was correct? That night, as he sat by his fire eating his simple dinner, Daichi reflected on his conversation with the monks. He realized that he had been limiting himself with his own narrow definition of who he was. He had thought that being a woodcutter was somehow less valuable than being a scholar or monk, but the abbot had helped him see that his deep knowledge and natural compassion were forms of wisdom. Over the following weeks, Daichi began to notice things about himself that he had never recognized before. When neighbors came to him for advice about practical problems, he realized he was indeed teaching. When he helped lost travelers find their way, he was demonstrating compassion. When he worked in harmony with the natural rhythms of the forest, he was practicing a form of meditation. Nothing about his daily activities had changed, but his understanding of who he was had expanded completely. He was still a woodcutter, but he was also much more. He was a teacher, a guide, a wise man, and a source of help for his community. Years later, when people would ask Daichi about the nature of identity, he would say, "I used to think I was just a woodcutter. Then I learned I was also a teacher and a wise man. But eventually I understood that all these labels are like clothes I wear. Underneath them, I am simply someone who tries to be helpful and pay attention to life. That seems to be enough." This story reveals one of the most profound teachings in Zen Buddhism about the nature of self and identity. We often limit ourselves by accepting narrow definitions of who we are, but these identities are not fixed truths. They are simply stories we tell ourselves, and we have the power to recognize the fuller truth of our being. Daichi's transformation did not require him to change his job or learn new skills. It required him to see beyond the limiting label he had placed on himself. When he stopped defining himself as just a woodcutter, he could recognize all the wisdom, compassion, and knowledge that he had developed through his simple, devoted work. This teaching is especially important because many people suffer from thinking they are just something ordinary or unimportant. Just a parent, just a worker, just a student. But Zen wisdom teaches us that there is no such thing as just anything. Every role, when approached with attention and care, becomes a path for developing wisdom and compassion. The truth that Daichi discovered is that our deepest identity is not found in any particular role or achievement. It is found in our capacity to pay attention, to learn from experience, and to help others. These qualities can develop within any life circumstances, whether we are woodcutters or scholars, parents or professionals. This understanding brings tremendous freedom because it means we do not need to change our external circumstances to discover our true value. We do not need special education, impressive jobs, or recognized status to be worthy of respect and self-acceptance. The wisdom and compassion that matter most can develop through any sincere engagement with life. Take a gentle breath and feel how this teaching creates space around any limiting ideas you might have about yourself. Notice what it might feel like to see beyond the labels you have accepted and recognize the fuller truth of who you are. There is another aspect of this teaching about our true nature that takes us even deeper. It is the recognition that beneath all our changing roles and identities, beneath all our thoughts and emotions, there is an awareness that simply observes and experiences. This awareness is not something we need to create or achieve. It is what we already are. In Zen practice, we learn to recognize this awareness through simple presence. When you notice you are thinking, what is doing the noticing? When you observe an emotion arising, what is doing the observing? This witnessing awareness is your true nature. It was present when you were born, it will be present when you die, and it is here right now, reading these words. Most of us identify with the contents of our awareness rather than awareness itself. We think we are our thoughts, our emotions, our roles, our achievements. But these are all temporary visitors in the space of awareness. They come and go, but awareness remains. Let us explore another story that shows how recognizing this truth can transform our entire relationship with ourselves and life. There once was a monastery that took in orphan children and raised them as part of the community. One of these children, a boy named Kodo, had been found as an infant with no knowledge of his parentage or background. The monks raised him with love and care, but Kodo always felt different from the others. Unlike the monks who had chosen their spiritual path, Kodo felt like he belonged nowhere in particular. He was not officially a monk, since he had never taken vows, but he was not a regular villager either, since he had been raised in the monastery. He helped with daily tasks and participated in temple life, but he often felt like he was just existing without any real purpose or identity. As Kodo grew into a young man, his sense of not belonging became stronger. He would watch the monks during their formal ceremonies and feel like an outsider. He would see village families during festivals and feel envious of their clear family bonds. He began to think of himself as nobody special, just someone who had happened to end up at the monastery by accident. One day, a famous master from the capital came to visit their temple. Master Sojin was known throughout the region for his wisdom and his ability to see the true nature of anyone he met. The local monks were excited to receive such an honored guest, and they prepared their finest ceremonies and presentations to impress him. During Master Sojin's stay, each monk was invited to meet with him privately to receive personal guidance. Kodo assumed he would not be included in these meetings since he was not officially a monk, but to his surprise, he was called to see the master just like everyone else. Kodo approached the meeting nervously, unsure what to say to such an important teacher. He entered the simple room where Master Sogen was sitting and bowed respectfully. "Please sit," the master said kindly. "Tell me about yourself." "There is not much to tell, master," Kodo said humbly. "I am not really anybody special. I was left here as a baby, and the monks have been kind enough to let me stay. I help with daily work, but I do not have any particular skills or purpose. I am just here." Master Sojin listened carefully to this self-description, studying Kodo's face with gentle attention. When Kodo finished, the master asked, "Who told you that you are nobody special?" Kodo felt confused by the question. Well, nobody told me directly. I just know it is true. I do not have parents or a family name. I have not taken vows or achieved anything important. I am just an orphan who lives at a monastery. I see, Master Sogen said quietly. And who told you that having parents makes someone special? Who decided that taking vows or achieving things determines a person's value? Kodo had never thought about these questions before. I suppose I just assumed these things mattered. Master Sogen smiled gently. Let me tell you what I see when I look at you. I see someone who has been shaped by daily spiritual practice since infancy. I see someone who has learned to live simply and help others without expecting recognition. I see someone who has grown up surrounded by wisdom and compassion and has absorbed these qualities naturally. The master leaned forward slightly. Most people come to spiritual practice later in life after their minds have been filled with worldly desires and confused ideas. You have been practicing from the beginning, even if you did not know that is what you were doing. Your ordinary daily life has been a form of meditation. Kodo felt confused. But I have never achieved enlightenment or had profound realizations like the stories about great masters. And how do you know that? Master Sogen asked. What do you think enlightenment looks like? Do you think it must come with dramatic visions or supernatural powers? I thought it would feel different somehow. I thought enlightened people would feel special or different from ordinary people. Master Sogen laughed softly. My friend, you have been looking for enlightenment as if it was something extraordinary that would make you feel important and special. But what if enlightenment is simply the complete acceptance of being ordinary? What if wisdom is found not in feeling special, but in recognizing that everyone is already complete exactly as they are? He gestured toward the window where they could see other monks going about their daily tasks. Look at your brothers out there. They are sweeping, cooking, gardening. Are they any less wise when they are doing these simple tasks than when they are sitting in meditation? Is their Buddha nature only present during formal practice? Kodo watched the familiar scene of daily monastery life with new eyes. He began to understand what the master was pointing toward. The Buddha nature you have been seeking, Master Sogen continued, is not hidden somewhere inside you waiting to be discovered through special achievements. It is what has been looking through your eyes your whole life. It is what has been present during every moment of kindness, every act of service, every instant of simple attention to your daily tasks. Master Sogen stood up and placed a gentle hand on Kodo's shoulder. You came here telling me you are nobody special, and in a way you are absolutely right. You are not special in the way the ego wants to be special, not important in the way the mind wants to be important. But this ordinariness you are disappointed by is actually your greatest gift. You have lived your whole life without the burden of trying to become someone special, and because of that, you have remained naturally who you really are. That evening, as Kodo went about his usual tasks of helping with dinner and evening cleanup, everything felt simultaneously exactly the same and completely different. He was still doing the same work, still living the same simple life, but he was no longer waiting for something better to happen. He was no longer looking for a different identity or a special achievement to make him feel valuable. He realized that the seeking itself had been the only thing preventing him from recognizing what was already present. His true nature had been there all along, not hidden, but so obvious that he had overlooked it while searching for something more impressive. This story reveals the deepest teaching about our true nature in Zen Buddhism. We often think we need to become someone special, achieve something important, or have dramatic spiritual experiences to be worthy or complete. But the truth is exactly the opposite. Our true nature is already present, not as something extraordinary, but as the ordinary awareness that experiences our daily life. Kodo's journey shows us how our seeking for a special identity can actually prevent us from recognizing the natural completeness that is already here. When we stop trying to become someone important and instead appreciate who we already are, we discover that we were never actually lacking anything. This teaching brings immense relief because it means we do not need to wait for some future achievement or realization to be fundamentally okay. We do not need to earn our worth through accomplishments or spiritual attainments. The awareness that is reading these words right now, the consciousness that experiences your thoughts and feelings, is already complete and perfect, just as it is. The path of Zen is not about becoming enlightened, but about recognizing the enlightenment that is already present. Not about achieving a special state, but about seeing through the illusion that we need a special state to be complete. Like Kodo, we often overlook our natural wholeness while searching for something more impressive. This recognition is the greatest gift these ancient teachings offer. Not techniques for becoming better, but the wisdom to see that underneath all our ideas about ourselves, we are already whole. This wholeness is what allows us to rest completely, knowing that we are home exactly where we are. As you settle into this teaching now, feel into the possibility that you are already exactly who you are meant to be. Not perfect in the sense of having no room for growth or learning, but complete in the sense that your fundamental nature lacks nothing. The peace that comes from this recognition is not something you need to achieve, but something you can recognize right here, right now, in the simple fact of your own aware presence. We have traveled together through the heart of Zen Buddhism, exploring teachings that have guided countless seekers toward peace for over 2,000 years. We have learned about facing suffering instead of fleeing from it. We have discovered the power of presence, the gift of compassion, and the freedom of letting go. We have seen how impermanence makes life precious, how direct experience surpasses intellectual knowledge, and how our true nature has been here all along. These teachings are not separate lessons to master one by one. They are different faces of the same simple truth. When we stop fighting against life and learn to meet it with awareness and kindness, peace naturally arises. Not the peace of having everything go our way, but the peace of being able to meet whatever comes with an open heart and steady mind. The stories you have heard tonight are not just ancient tales. They are mirrors showing you your own journey, your own struggles, your own capacity for wisdom and compassion. Like the tea merchant learning to taste, like the baker offering bread to thieves, like the gardener accepting falling blossoms, you too can choose presence over distraction, compassion over judgment, acceptance over resistance. As you rest now, know that everything these teachings point toward is already within you. The peace you seek is not hiding in some distant future. It is here, in this breath, in this moment of simple awareness. You do not need to become someone different or achieve something special. You simply need to recognize what has always been true. Let yourself rest completely now. The teachings will continue their work quietly, like seeds planted in fertile ground. Tomorrow you may not remember every story or concept, but something essential will remain. A slight softening of the heart. A quiet, knowing that you are already home. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.